been as resounding as it is clear. We are in an era of rearmament to respond to the short-term urgency to act and to support Ukraine, but also to address the long-term need to take on more responsibility for our own European security.
On Saturday, we also agreed a new £2.2 billion loan for Ukraine, backed not by the British taxpayer, but by the profits from frozen Russian assets. It is my pleasure to bring from His Majesty the King a letter. He sends his best wishes and his regards, of course, but he also asked me to bear this letter and bring it to you. So can I present the letter from the King to you?
Thank you very much. Am I supposed to read it right now?
Yeah, please do.
I will do.
I've got to tell him what your reaction is, so I need to know. I need to know.
He is a great gentleman. A great, great gentleman. He said he thinks the war's going to go on for a long time, and he better not be right. Well, I just think he should be more appreciative, because this country has stuck with them through thick and thin. We've given them much more than Europe, and Europe should have given more than us, because as you know, that's right there, that's the border.
What kind of diplomacy, JD, you are speaking about? What do you mean?
I'm talking about the kind of diplomacy that's going to end the destruction of your country.
Yes, but if you
Mr. President, with respect, I think it's disrespectful for you to come into the Oval Office and try to litigate.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello, a very good morning to just after 6 o'clock on Saturday, March the 22nd. Do not fear, I am back. Thanks very much to my colleagues for holding the hot seat whilst I was away. Thank you very much for your company this morning. Now, as you would expect, I have great news for you. That's right, it's International Day of the Seal today. That's right. It's a day that celebrates the marine mammal. Now, they vary in size. Yes, they do. Lovely noise. They vary in size from 40 kilos to more than 3,600 kilos. Now, I can hear people around the country saying, well, what does that mean in old money? Well, 3,600 kilos is 566 stone, 12 pounds and 10 ounces. That is a very heavy boy. Yeah, now, in the wild, the grey seal can actually live up to 35 years and sleep underwater. Also today, it's As Young As You Feel Day. This is a day for those of you who find excuses all the time not to do things by saying things like, I'm too old. Well, today is the day where you can rebel and stop worrying about what other people think. And happy birthday to a true legend, actually. Andrew Lloyd Webber, English composer, theatre producer, composer of musicals, 21 musicals, 2 film scores. He is 77 today. Very happy birthday to you. Oh, it's a cat. I get you. It's a cat. Right, let's move on and start today's fascinating facts. Today's fascinating facts. So today's fascinating facts. On this day in 1774, Mary Cooper published the first book of English nursery rhymes called Tommy Thumb's Songbook. It included Baa Baa Black Sheep, also whose 3 bags full is thought to refer to a tax imposed on the wool trade in 1275. On this day in 1824, the British Parliament purchased 38 paintings, which cost a very princely £57,000, to establish a national collection now at the National Gallery in Trafalgar Square in London. And on this day in 1926, love this, the first directional road markings were introduced onto British roads at Hyde Park Corner in London. As you can imagine, it caused a widespread confusion and led to 7 accidents on the very first day. And those are this hour's fascinating facts. Today's fascinating facts.
Before everything feels right, weekend breakfast, shining like the sun.
Good morning. morning, 5 minutes past 6 on Saturday, March the 22nd. Yes, I am back. And before you ask, I was in Spain and it rained for the entire week. So that was not triumphant at all. Also, my producer was also in sunny Spain. I think he misbehaved himself as well. But joining me this morning, I'm delighted to say, Claire Muldoon, Scotland's finest. Good morning.
How are you?
I'm all right, thank you. How are you?
I'm very well.
Nice to see you.
Loved your fascinating facts this morning.
Did you?
I did.
That's just this hours.
Oh my goodness me, aren't you on it? And your new jingle.
And my new jingle,
Oh,
thanks
wow.
to Eddie. Yes,
That's
I know.
fantastic.
It's all go here at
It
Talk
is,
TV
it
Tales.
is. When you're here, it is.
Do you know, I was just reading about Andrew Lloyd Webber. He really, whether you like musicals or not, I think you have to sort of take your hat off to him. He's an extraordinary talent, actually, when you
Him
think
and
about
Tim
what he's
Rice.
achieved. And Tim Rice, of course, Richard Stilgoe, who
Yep.
co-wrote Starlight Express.
Starlight
actually.
Express.
Yeah. Lloyd Webber actually studied at Magdalen College in Oxford and the Royal College of Music and began collaborating, as you say, with Tim Rice there on dramatic productions. Which, are you a fan of musicals?
Well, some of them I am, but when you think back to Blood Brothers...
Yeah, brilliant musical.
With Barbara Dixon and, gosh, who was
It was
there?
one of the Nolans, wasn't it, in that as well?
The songs were just... And Elaine Page.
Elaine Page.
And, you know, Cats, Jesus Christ Superstar, Joseph and his amazing Technicolor.
Do you know when that was
Dreamcoat.
written?
What?
Joseph.
Must have been in the 70s.
68. That's extraordinary. That was the original version that they wrote.
We did that as a school musical
I did
in
too.
our primary school.
Yeah.
I was Potiphar. And I can
Was
still...
Potiphar a man?
Well, we were ahead of
You
the
were
game
well
there.
ahead of the game.
And don't forget it was in Scotland.
Yeah, well, that's right.
An
Yeah.
ID is anything you want.
And
But-
Jesus Christ Superstar, 1971.
Yes.
You see, these
That
were
was the
written
year
on
before I was born.
It was after I was born. But again, Jesus Christ Superstar, it was a really interesting use of music because it combined the classical genre with much more rockier themes.
It really did. It seemed to break down some barriers.
Exactly. And in fact, Jesus Christ Superstar became the longest-running musical in British theatrical history at that time. Then, of course, they wrote Evita, which was 1978, about Eva Peron.
Argentina.
Yeah. And I actually visited Eva Peron's grave when I was in Argentina.
Buenos Aires.
Sorry, in Buenos
Buenos
Aires.
Aires.
Watch out, Buenos Aires. That's another song from that musical as well. Also, the London production received an Olivier Award for Best Musical. It won 7 Tony Awards on Broadway, one for Best Musical, Best Score. Then, of course, Cats. I never really liked Cats, I have to say.
I have never seen it.
Right.
Never seen it.
Fair enough. That did very well as well. Starlight Express, lyrics by Richard Stilgoe. 1984 that was. Phantom, of course. So, you see, and Sunset Boulevard, we forgot that. And I watched the Sunset Boulevard one in London, and it was just the most incredible staging of that musical. But again, you know, for a very small island, we turn out some amazing talent.
We do, but don't you just think, though, that the creative industry has kind of stalled at some points because the creatives can't live and work together because of the cost of living.
I would agree.
The cost of housing, especially in London. London used to be the epicentre, Soho, on the Telgarth Road for all those beautiful artists, you know, these beautiful
Which are now
halls.
covered in grime,
Yes.
aren't they? And for those people who don't know where that is, it's in West London. But it is a shadow of its former self. And actually, just going back to that Soho, there's some sort of articles this morning floating around about this. Soho used to be this kind of dirty centre of artistic excellence. And of course, all the NIMBYs have moved into these £1 million townhouses and are complaining about the noise. Well, you're living in Soho, what do you expect?
But Grayson Perry actually brought up a very good point a few years ago, in fact, to say that young creatives are really the growth fields for the economy, really, because we're not a manufacturing country any longer. And we need to provide, I mean, the depth of talent that this country has in the creative industry. I mean, you just rolled off your tongue there, the myriad of musicals written in the 60s and 70s. What's been written now? You know, has it been written by AI? Is everything... I mean, even Soho now is full of fintech. All financial technology.
Yeah,
now.
you're right. And of course, all the AI stuff that you talk about. But I'm just deeply concerned that you also don't have the cauldron where people can mix together and those creative talents coming together.
I know.
And being able to use their creative juices to form something amazing. Andrew Lloyd Webber, just going back to him, of course, he then founded his Really Useful group and very cleverly, of course, then bought all the theatres, so he was in control of every single bit. I don't think you could do that nowadays.
Well, you can't. Cameron Mackintosh, do you remember at the time when Les Miserables was out? I mean, I'm talking back in the mid-80s to late 80s. Cameron Mackintosh was a stalwart for theatre productions and theatres in this country, and not even just London, all over. And it's just seemed to have fallen off a cliff at the moment. It really has done.
And of course, theatre prices are very expensive.
They're prohibitively expensive.
You can get cheaper tickets, but I went to the theatre for my sister's birthday, actually, and it was half empty.
Really?
Because I just think the cost of those seats is exorbitant. Young people can't go and see those productions, and the productions themselves, I mean, you can see it. Central London is a shadow of its former self.
It really is.
And it's
really
almost
is.
too
It's so
sanitised,
sad.
I think.
Well, we've got trigger warnings and everything as well.
Yeah.
I mean, you talk about Soho back in the day, and it was grimy, it was grubby, but it was...
I spent a lot of money there. Let me tell you. I'm sure you did.
I did.
Yes.
I really did. I was talking the other day to someone who says, yeah, I'm working now in a fintech company in Soho. And I thought, really? Isn't that where we used to go for drinks and where we used to...
Well, it was also
come
the
back
hub of
home in the
television.
morning?
That's where all the edit suites are
All the
and so on.
meetings were happening.
Yeah.
It was great.
It was great.
It was really, really great.
Let's reinvent it, Claire.
Yeah,
you
let's
and
do
me.
it. Let's do
Okay.
it.
Let's move on and talk about the big story this morning. If you are just waking up, Heathrow Airport, it is everywhere. The front page of the Times, Heathrow chaos puts bosses in the firing line. The Daily Telegraph, colossal failure of Heathrow blackout. Remember, it's the busiest airport in Europe, brought to a standstill. Heathrow chaos to last for days as fire exposes UK weaknesses. That's the eye. Chaos and anger as fire shuts Heathrow Airport. Grounded is the Mirror. That's that one. And the Daily Mail, I think, pretty much sums it up. The whole situation, farcical. And it is absolutely farcical that a fire at an electrical substation, which is out of the perimeter of Heathrow Airport, can ground all of those planes. 300,000 people, that's a third of a million people now all in the wrong place. And National Grid and Heathrow bosses under pressure to explain how on earth a fire at a substation could effectively shut down Heathrow Airport. And then you've got backup substations, one of which was based in the same area, so that exploded as well. And as I said, more than 1,300 flights cancelled, 300,000 passengers all over the place. And then luckily and thankfully, they started running flights last night. I mean, it's A, it's abject failure, and B, it's embarrassing.
And C, there's no accountability.
None.
And that, for me, is the worst part of it all, David. But why on earth was the substation shared with people who lived in Hayes? You know, it's domestic and industrial.
Well, I think
and then the
other thing-
backup didn't work.
Well, that's the other thing,
Come
is that I
on.
do not understand why, and this is part of critical national infrastructure, why it doesn't have its own power plant.
Yes.
So many other airports around the world have their own power stations to ensure that things like this cannot happen. Do you remember, and I was caught up in this, the drone strike that grounded all the aircraft? I was at Gatwick when that happened. In this day and age, that should not happen.
No.
When you've got this number of people coming into the country, we are an island, we need to have people coming in, whether it's on business or for holidays or whatever. It's embarrassing, it's awful for the people caught up in it. And in terms of compensation, people are not entitled to a vast amount of compensation because it's not the fault of the airline.
But well, no, it's not. But how on earth can they actually... If there was flights overhead, they couldn't land. Where have they gone, right? Where have the displaced planes with the passengers gone?
Well, they got turned around. They went to Schiphol, they went to Paris, some of them went back to Washington, New York. So if you look at, I'm a bit of a nerd, if you look at Flight Radar, where you can see flights coming in, you can see the difference. There was just basically a total blackout of UK airspace. And there are questions to be asked. A, of National Grid, what on earth are you doing? Why is there no backup? But B, for Heathrow, they've invested in a biomass generator. Now, my understanding was that this was meant to kick in times of emergency. They say, oh no, that just keeps the emergency lighting on. What use is that?
What use is that? Who needs lights when there's no one there?
That's also very true.
That's almost like the lights on, but there's no one home.
So, according to the article, this is in the Times this morning, airline bosses are said to be furious. As I was saying, the compensation issues. We'll talk to Lisa Minnow later, actually, travel editor later, about what you can do if you are caught up in it. And then yesterday, the story took another turn, where they then said, well, counter-terrorism officials are looking at it. Was this actually an act of sabotage by the GRU, by Russia? At the moment, they're ruling that out. Having said that, there are people that I trust saying, I don't think you can rule this out entirely at this moment. And also, in terms of just targeting national infrastructure, we are in a very perilous situation globally. The world is very unstable. We need to start looking at critical infrastructure in this country. And I mentioned nuclear power stations at this point. Do you know they're predominantly owned by foreign entities? What are we doing?
We have just sold... But the airport itself, is that BAA not owned by the Spanish?
So Heathrow is actually owned by the Qataris. It's owned by investment funds. I think it's owned by a French investment fund as well.
Okay.
But again, one might just say, hang on a minute, shouldn't this be owned by a UK company, or indeed shouldn't there be some sort of oversight as to what they're doing?
You would think, wouldn't you?
And also, just going back to the investment in Heathrow Airport, they've been holding off building a power plant, apparently, because they want a third runway before they do that.
So you've just brought me on to that, because of course the Labour government post their election, Rachel Reeves has come and said that she wants the third runway for Heathrow. I mean, what's going to do? We can't even build it, for heaven's sake. We can't sustain it.
But you see, then, and I was reading another article saying that, but doesn't this underpin the fact that we're so reliant on a single airport?
Yeah.
Yes, of course, we have Stansted. Yes, we do have Gatwick. But...
And Luton and City.
But if we'd got... And Luton and City. But those are very small airports compared with the size of Heathrow. But actually, if you go back to the idea that Boris came up with, the Thames Estuary Airport, we have no capacity because successive governments have failed to invest in air infrastructure.
But not even air infrastructure, the infrastructure surrounding these airports to get to them, they're horrific. And a lot of these regional airports have very early and very late night flights, which aren't conducive to families travelling to them to get the flights.
But that's also why
because
I'm throwing...
there's no infrastructure.
But let me throw the Thames Estuary at you.
Yeah.
The reason that I always like this idea, and of course it would have been very costly, is because you're flying over the water. You could then have flights 24/7 without impacting anyone in terms of noise, which is a major problem in West London. I'm actually staying across the river from where City Airport is at the moment, and the noise of those aircraft is continuous. And of course, we do not allow flights in late at night.
And also, with the shutdown of Heathrow, there are loads of people on zero-hour contracts as well that wouldn't have been paid.
Yeah, that's a good point.
You know, and it's critical. We need to work. We don't work for the fun of it.
So then I think there are lots of questions to be asked of people like Thomas Waldby, who's the chief executive of Heathrow.
Yeah.
We don't know how much he's paid, but his predecessor was paid something like £630 million to run that airport.
For what?
For what? And, you know, going back to that drone strike, it ruined our holiday. We were due to go away. It was Christmas at that time. How can someone fly a drone and cripple our air infrastructure? And we haven't learned any lessons, it seems to me.
No, we haven't, but you have to... I think I'm looking at this through the lens of accident and emergency, right? And if Waldby was a consultant in an A&E ward, he'd be sacked. What has he done to enable this accident and the emergency consequences thereof?
Well, so the chief executive says, oh, we've got backup systems, they were working as they should. No. Well, they didn't do very well, did they? They're not designed, apparently, according to him, to run the whole airport. Well, why not?
Is this a rush to net zero as well?
Yes.
Did they have a diesel generator that they decommissioned?
Very good. It's a biomass energy centre on site. And then Ed Miliband, Mad Ed, turns up.
So what's he said?
Well, Mad Ed turns up and says, oh, we haven't seen anything like the scale of what's happened. It makes Heathrow look quite vulnerable. Yeah, because of your lunatic policies.
Yeah, exactamundo.
So what is the government going to do about this? And for me, what this shows is that when you are in power, when you are the government, you have to make some very difficult decisions. And I would have said that in this unstable world, that the infrastructure of this country is of paramount importance.
What do you think then of Mark Carney saying to the Canadians in his interim post as President of Canada that he's going to scrap the net zero?
Obviously, I don't believe in having this arbitrary net zero goal.
Yeah. So why don't we do the same then? Surely he, as a liberal elite, coming in now to say that.
And that's very interesting because, of course, Reform UK's policy has always been to scrap it.
Yeah.
Now, of course, the Conservative Party under Kemi Badenoch, she says it's not achievable. Well done. She's woken up.
Yeah.
So we do need to... Whilst many people want to move to the idea of net zero, it doesn't work.
No, it doesn't. And no amount of plastic bag tariff on when you go for your shopping to buy one, it doesn't save anything. You're still using plastics. Fruit and veg is still wrapped in plastics. Supermarkets haven't. They say they have changed, but they haven't. But we can all make the small details, turn down the temperature in our washing. We can do all of these things. We can cripple ourselves by paying too much for our energy with the tariff and the green tariff on it too. Electric cars, really heavy, increase in potholes in the thingy. Very expensive now. We've now got a dearth of them lying up. You know, no one's buying them because they're too expensive. It's costing us a fortune. Why don't we just scrap it? I don't get it. In the 80s, there was this thing of acid rain. Do you remember that?
I do remember. Carbon dioxide.
Exactly. And you think, well, and I remember a chemist saying to me, if it was acidic rain, it would be melting our faces off. No one talks about that anymore.
I suppose it depends on the concentration of acidity. There is another story about recycling this morning, about jam jars. So they're the government's bringing in these new tariffs, which is based on the weight of the recycling, which the producer will have to pay for. Now, for people like Tiptree, who make very nice jam...
Delicious jam.
They're saying, well, hang on a minute, why are we doing it by weight when glass is eminently recyclable?
Yeah.
All this is going to do is to push people to use more plastic. So again, no joined-up thinking.
No joined-up thinking. And then the stupid Green Party in Scotland with the glass bottle levy. I don't know if you remember, I don't know if you had it here, but...
Milkman.
Well, not only milkman, but if you had like a fizzy Coca-Cola or fizzy Iron Brew, they were always delivered in glass jars, glass bottles, and then you would take them back and you'd get like a recyclable fee for them, and you would actually get money back.
Which was brilliant. And as a child, we used to go around collecting them and getting the money back.
Exactly.
And that needs to come back. I mean, it's also quite interesting. There's another story in the Daily Mail, and I do need to get to a break, saying, is one blundering engineer responsible for crippling Heathrow?
Oh, let's hope we're not blaming on one particular person.
What is clear, and we mentioned it earlier, is about the data centres over in West London and the amount of power they're drawing. That substation was running at about 110% of its actual
capacity.
Usage. So, again... there's been no investment, as you can see here, the substation up in flames. Let me just ask you all, thanks for the moment, Claire, let me just ask you a question. It seems to me, having come back to this country, that no one knows how to run this country. This is a bit of an ethereal question this morning. But if you were in charge, if you could pick anyone at all in the world to run this country, who would you pick? 0344 499 1000, those calls charged at the national rate. You can text the word talk in your message to 87222. You can message us on X as well, at talkTV. Good morning, David and Claire. This is Nikki. So glad you're back. That's very kind. So what of Rachel Reeves' plan for a third runway? Pinning her hopes on it for a whole 0.43% growth in a million years' time. Who is going to invest after this farcical incident? Would it not be a great place for one of the small SMRs, the small modular reactors? Brilliant, Nikki. Love it. We'll return after this break.
really good question, not least because, exactly as you say, British Airways, commendably, I think, getting 8 long-haul flights away tonight. That's critical also for the people who are waiting at the other end to be flown home, or indeed flown to Britain for business, for holidays, whatever. I mean, the economic hit of this we can maybe talk about is huge. But Thomas Walby, the chief executive of Heathrow, almost said, nothing to see here, we're back to normal tomorrow. You won't be. It was plainly obvious.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is Talk 6:27 on Saturday, March the 22nd. I'm joined by the lovely Claire Muldoon this morning. I'm asking this morning, given the chaos, abject chaos, literally, it's every day, I open the paper and I think, here we go again, the UK in abject decline and nothing works in this country. Now we've got Heathrow and the fire and we've got 300,000 people all over the place. It's a terrible advert for the United Kingdom, for Great Britain. And so I'm asking this morning, if you could choose anyone, and it could be anyone at all, who would you choose to run this country and to turn this country around? Let me know your thoughts, please. 0344 499 1000. Those calls charged at the national rate. You can text the word talk in your message to 87222. David, good morning, David. If I could choose anyone to run the country, this is David, it wouldn't be any of the politicians we currently have. It should be run by business brains who understand what it takes to make a decision. That's Dave in Colne. I was thinking of someone like, he's no longer with us, but Sir John Harvey-Jones, someone like that, someone who is a business person who actually understands...
Well, the only thing about that is, did you read or did you hear Alan Sugar's interview with Amal Rajan?
No, I didn't.
Well, he was saying Brexit is basically the reason why we're in this mess.
Rubbish.
Well, exactly, but he is a very... You know, he's a huge businessman and he's got his own show, etc., etc.
Yeah.
So then you think, well, if it was a businessman, could you really trust them?
Good point.
So I don't. I think we should have Robert Winston as head of health and safety in the country. I think he was brilliant.
I think he's a big Remainer as well. I don't know.
Wow.
I don't know. Good morning, David. I would pick Nigel Farage to run this country. This is Steve in Cambridge, and would hope he would make the people running our services accountable when they don't do their jobs. Nice to have you back. Thank you very much, Steve. Good morning, David and Claire. Someone like Donald Trump, strong, determined and loyal to his country and his people. Let's just talk about this counter-terrorism line, because we're being told all the time that whilst counter-terrorism police were actually involved in the investigation into what is going on, there is no evidence so far that counter-terrorism terrorism is involved in this. But there is quite an interesting article in The Telegraph saying MI5 will be checking very carefully for Putin's fingerprints on the Heathrow fire. Every inch of the area will be subjected to a bank of forensic checks, as will all CCTV and communications. It goes on to say that the fire has the hallmarks of Russian state-sponsored terrorism, which we've seen in 15 countries, including Britain, linked to Russian intelligence since Putin rolled his tanks into Ukraine in late February 22. It's worth talking about those train derailments, attacks on warehouses, transport planes, assassination plots against industrialists, election interference and so on. I mean, it wouldn't take a genius if you were mapping the electricity supply of Heathrow to track it down to an electricity substation and to lob a couple of grenades in there.
Well, I think, one, we're right to look into it as a counter-terrorism issue or potential, and I think we have to deal with that, because if anything, they can learn from it, if it was and if it wasn't. What I don't think, however, is helpful in any way, shape or form to have headlines like that, or even to discuss things like that, because the truth is we don't know, and we need to look at the... I mean, I'm laughing now, but I don't know if you saw, both Sky News and The Guardian misinterpreted SAS the airlines for the SAS.
No.
Yes. Yes.
What did they say?
Yes. SAS Airlines put out a tweet saying, we want to thank Sky News and The Guardian, but we just need to make sure that you're aware that we are, we don't deal with parachutes in the air, we deal with coffee.
That's fantastic.
Which is fantastic. So it begs the question where people get their news sources from, what is news, how the news is actually put through a lens, and how you then see it.
Check and double check, I would suggest.
Yeah.
Let's just hear what Sadiq Khan, the Mayor of London, had to say.
Yeah, let's. I'm interested in this.
They work really closely with the Met Police Service. The Met Police Service bring in specialist expertise as and when, clearly because of the proximity of the substation to the airport. It's not a surprise. The counter-terror team's been involved. The Met Police Service, the Fire Brigade will make sure that the public know whenever there's any information to pass on to the public, but there's no reason at all to suspect foul play at the moment.
I mean, also, one has to ask, how much are we being told in the first place, whether we should be told?
Yeah.
You have to also think about Litvinenko. Also, remember that Russian terror cell holed up in that great notorious place of Great Yarmouth. so it's not beyond the realms of possibility, is it?
It's really not. But, you know, that great terror cell in Great Yarmouth, were they all called after Pikachu or Pokemon characters or something? You know, there's conspiracy theorists, there's espionage, we all want to be living in a Bond movie. Actually, I just want to get from A to B rather safely. That power station fire, substation, is an absolute abhorrence, and it should never have happened.
No, of course it shouldn't.
And we should not have had headlines in our national press showing the busiest airport in Europe to be held up as some kind of joke.
Farcical. That is the headline in the Daily Mail this morning. Farcical. I think that sums the whole thing up. Let's talk about Mad Ed, shall we?
Yes.
Mad Ed Miliband. So his latest great idea, by the way, and this links perfectly because, of course, this is a lack of power, because the grid is oversubscribed, because we have data centres and we are moving to net zero. Why don't we invest in SMRs and actually having some continuity of energy supply in this country? So Mad Ed has come up with this new great idea. He's going to GB Energy is going to put solar panels on English schools and hospitals. Wait for this. They're coming from China.
And what are they made with? But how are they made?
from I don't know.
Using coal.
Yes, of course.
So they're using coal.
Yes.
To put these made in China. We're importing these to put them up.
It's fantastic. Critics say it makes no sense for Britain to attempt to cut emissions by shipping materials from China, using coal-fired power stations to actually manufacture the solar panels. And yet Ed Miliband thinks this is a triumph.
And who's paying for it?
We are.
Who's paying for it? We are.
We are. Let's move on and talk about another story this morning, which actually started yesterday. But this is about the King. This is yesterday's. The King to make a secret offer to Donald Trump during the state visit. Apparently, King Charles will make a secret offer to Donald Trump during his state visit to reduce tensions between the White House and Canada. This is a really intriguing offer. There are plans in the works to make the USA the next associate member of the Commonwealth. So we know the Commonwealth, a third of the world's population, it boasts 56 states, would welcome the US as an associate member. Now, as far as I'm aware, there are no associate members of the Commonwealth currently. Now, the latest news on this morning, which is being reported in The Telegraph, Donald Trump has suggested he will sign the United States up as an associate member of the Commonwealth because of his love for the King. The US president, who's been invited to this state visit, posted on the Truth Social platform saying that he would be delighted to join up as an associate member. He says, "I love King Charles. It sounds good to me." I mean, is that a diplomatic triumph or what?
I think it is. I'm sorry, when we were discussing it earlier, I thought that the framing of it was the King wanted to give the Commonwealth countries to the States.
Not at all.
But, you know, why not?
Well, I think
Trump wants, the Gulf of Mexico to be the Gulf of America.
Yeah.
He wants Greenland to be American. You know,
and Canada to be American.
Well,
and of course, you see, this is the dichotomy for the King, because of course Canada is part of the Commonwealth. The King is the head of Canada.
Yeah.
And so here, by bringing the United States, and I did make me laugh this morning, I was thinking the Boston Tea Party, you see, it's all coming back to roost, isn't it? You know, the United States will be ours once again. I just think it's canny.
Well, it is a canny move, but, you know, they are meeting in Scotland, so the question would be, can he do it or can he not?
Oh, very good. The idea of inviting America to be an associate member, by the way, was promoted by Nigel Farage in 2017, which I didn't know. He then passed the idea from Michael Lake, who was director of the RCS, which is the Royal Commonwealth Society, to Steve Bannon, the chief strategist at that time. It had the blessing of the late Queen, and obviously this has been sort of reheated as an idea, and it will be interesting to see how that plays out. And of course the UK is determined and desperate to avoid any tariffs which are being levied by Trump against the European Union, and for the first time you can see a really positive benefit to Brexit, which is, of course, we're not going to have the levy that will be imposed on the EU.
Absolutely. You know, I get it completely.
It's fascinating. It really is fascinating. Let's. I want to talk also about Rachel Reeves and the spring statement. We'll talk about that
on
after.
Wednesday it's coming out.
It is coming on Wednesday, and of course there's a big story this morning in the FT, which is about Rachel Reeves' cuts to total over 10 billion in a bid to restore UK finances. We'll talk about that after the break. I'm asking this morning, if you could pick anyone at all, to run this country, who would you pick? This is intriguing. Keith, good morning to you. Tim Martin of Wetherspoons, he is the man you need to run anything that needs to deliver every day of the year. That's great,
interesting,
great answer.
Yeah. I don't think he would take it, though.
No. Good morning, David. I would choose someone with common sense. The closest is Nigel Farage. There seems to be absolutely no sense in anything in the UK anymore. I truly despair. Lynn, I'm with you. That's Lynn in the West Midlands. Good morning, David. I missed you. That's very sweet. It's great to have you back. Thank you. That's Michelle in Altrincham. The person I'd like to see run the country is Nigel Farage. He stands for the values and leadership I believe we need, with a strong stance on protecting British interests, controlling immigration, putting people first. His no-nonsense approach and his commitment to real change makes him the right choice for me. Keep all of those messages coming in, please. After the break, we're going to talk more about the economic situation, the spring statement, what Rachel Reeves could do in that spring statement, and what she'll brief the House of Commons. That's all still to come. Me and Muldoon after this break.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Well, welcome back to 6:40. I'm being told to do an Ali G impression.
Booyakasha.
Oh, well done. Good morning, you two. I would like to see Ali G running our country. This is Tim. He wants respect and, more importantly, to keep it real. Is that good or bad? Quite
keep
bad.
it up a bit.
I think Claire Muldoon would be great running our country.
I really wouldn't.
She's lovely.
I am.
You are, but I'm not sure that's a prerequisite to running the country.
Oh, right, you just because they didn't see you.
I really wouldn't have me running the country. I've lost it now. I would like Claire Muldoon. She'd be great running the country. She's lovely. She's totally switched on about everything. Great show, David. That's
switched on more than Heathrow is. Thank you very much. No power outage here.
David, this is Steve. I would pick the person who would stop mass immigration, woke policies, net zero madness, giving our money to other countries, stopping the boats and putting the safety and welfare of British people first. I would say Nigel Farage, but I fear even reform seemed to be lowering my expectations. So, David, the answer is Donald Trump. Howard in Suffolk, good morning to you. We need someone who is not a coward. So most current politicians are out. They also need to do the right thing for the country and not themselves. Keep all of those messages coming in. It was a maverick thought I had this morning. If you had anyone, or you could pick anyone to run this country, who would you pick? 0344 499 1000. You can text the word talk in your message to 87222. Let's talk about another of my favourite people, Rachel Reeves. Right, so the economic situation in this country, I think it's fair to say, is diabolical, absolutely diabolical. When you look at the latest economic projections from the OBR, which, by the way, tends to be quite optimistic, they've halved the projections for our economic incline. So they have predicted the rate of growth has dropped from 2% to 1%. It's pathetic. 1%. The spring statement, of course, is on Wednesday, and Rachel Reeves has got some very tricky moves to make because, of course, she set these fiscal rules for herself. And if you remember, they said we won't increase, what did they say, income tax, national insurance. They said in national insurance and VAT. Now, obviously, it is believed, going to outline £10 billion of spending cuts in the spring statement. She is going to crack down on more than £5 billion of departmental spending growth, as well as the welfare cuts of £5 billion. She says she is going to stick to her fiscal rule. How long has she got before she's booted out?
This is the thing. So this £5 billion welfare cut that she's trying to do, she's doing that so that she can go to the banks and say, look, I've done this. This is within my fiscal rules. This is what I said I would do, but I need more money. I need to be able to borrow against that. So she's trying to ironically, make herself stronger by crippling, and I use that word metaphorically and literally, people in this country that rely on PIP payments and disability payments. It's cruel. But you would think, with 14 years in opposition, they knew all about this,
of course they did.
The black hole and the state of the economy, because figures are published.
I still think we have a major problem with the number of people who are not working in this country.
Yeah,
and there are families where no one works.
There are children, 1 in 10 children witness people in their families never working. That's just shocking, right? But that's another issue. This issue is the fact that they've had 14 years in opposition. They should have got their welfare checks all done, all tested and all approved before they walked through doors of number 10 and number 11.
Remember,
but they didn't,
But in that election, they didn't have any policies.
They had none. They had absolutely none. They sat back and looked on, eating their popcorn, watching the Conservatives implode in themselves, go through leader, through leader, through leader. Nothing was ever opposed. There was no opposition in terms to test policy, to test ideas, or even to test themselves at number 10 and number 11. And now they're saddled with this debt. They're making really poor choices. People are going to be brought into through fiscal drag paying
I'm glad you mentioned
higher
that.
amounts of tax now when they don't want it.
And you're right,
and they
because
need the money.
There is no doubt that using fiscal drag, and by that I mean that you freeze the income tax threshold bands,
so
you'll drag more and more people into the higher rate of tax.
taxpayer
And paying
bracket.
40% tax is A, detrimental to the individual, B, detrimental to our future prospects, and C, people will leave.
Well, if they can, they will, right? But with interest rates even remaining now at 4.95%, they weren't even cut. I'm surprised at that.
I'm surprised at that as well.
I'm really surprised.
But
the interest
again,
rates weren't cut.
and just in terms of the voting, I did think it would come down. Now, they're still sort of trying to price in 2 further interest rate cuts. Now, Rachel Reeves, when she stands up on Wednesday, she is going to blame Trump, without a doubt.
Oh, without
She's going to say there's going to be global instability. We are trying to ride that wave. Actually, it's your policies, the employer national insurance contributions, which, by the way, still haven't come in.
Yeah.
They come in on April the 6th. And we're already seeing this. You're seeing businesses laying people off, businesses saying they can no longer cope, SMEs, pubs and so on, restaurants saying we cannot pay the bills.
You cannot pay the bills. I mean, it's just ridiculous. It's horrible. It really is horrible. And you add into the mix people who are vulnerable, people who are disabled. And how do you think on earth they are going to feel?
Yeah, I totally
the most
agree.
vulnerable in society.
It is extraordinary when you look at the numbers. 7 million people will be paying the upper rate of tax, which seems extraordinary when you look in 1990, only 1.7 million
But
paid
do you know the
that
thing
tax.
that gets me? If people don't take the pay increase, right, that doesn't put them over the threshold for it, then what's the businesses are going to be taxed on capital gains.
Yeah.
So they're going to get the money anyway.
But not only that,
But where is the incentive?
I think it's also making,
It's making me so cross.
those self-employed people, the SMEs as well, thinking, what is the point?
What is the point?
So therefore, as you rightly say, I'll earn less money
Yep.
because therefore I don't go into the higher tax band.
Yep.
Or I'm going to work smarter. I'm going to leave. I'm going to go to a different country. And I'm seeing a lot of that, a lot of chatter about people saying, I don't want to stay here.
Yeah, and it used to be you went out to work because you had to. You have bills to pay, but you wanted to do it, and it gave you a spring in your step.
Exactly.
Now, I think people are so downtrodden. People are so held back. There doesn't seem to be any optimism, and there's no reward for hard work.
Yes, sorry, I was just captivated by what people are saying because I've asked who would you have running this country. David, I would choose Justin Urquhart-Stewart to run the country. Now, that's fascinating. He's on later, actually, this morning. So I will tell him that. He's a top economist and a true patriot. That's Tony. David, this is Elizabeth. She says, I would nominate Lord Alan Sugar to run this country. I don't think he'd stand any nonsense. Graham Short says, I want to see Ed Miliband running our country. He'd be totally useless, but it would be hilarious every single day. I'm not sure about that. This is Glenn in Leeds. I would like to see David Cameron back in charge.
Really?
Really? He was the last Prime Minister to take the office seriously and actually felt like there was a leader in charge for the good of the country.
He gave us a Brexit vote and Scottish
Not on an
independence
ideological
vote.
mission dreamt up in the sixth form common room. It is also worth saying that when David Cameron didn't get his way, he stormed off. He flounced out of number 10. So I'm not sure I would agree with that
And
one.
he only got the gig because the Lib Dem guy, what was his name?
Which one?
The one that started the coalition with Cameron. Nick Clegg.
Yes, Nick Clegg.
He actually had
Who went
all the
to Facebook.
cards. Yeah.
He did,
Actually,
that's
he did
right.
hold all the cards, but gave them over, played them straight into Cameron's hand.
Claire, thank you very much for the moment. We'll go to a break. After the break, I'm going to take you through all of this morning's front pages. This is Weekend Breakfast. A very good morning to you.
nearly lost my marriage. I've lost my job. It's been hard. I've managed to get a job in January, which I'll stay there for about a month, and then I've actually got a slightly better paid job, but only because the gentleman that interviewed me was willing to actually listen to me, my integrity and honesty, because I've said exactly why I was being dismissed.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back. This is Talk, 6:52, Saturday, March the 22nd. Clem Muldoon joins me this morning. Good morning to Sophie Preston-Hall. Waking up with Dr. David Bull on a Saturday morning. Who else is watching? Great show as always. The question asked this morning is, who would you rather have as Prime Minister of the great country? It's not quite what I asked, but I take the point. Nigel Farage, Keir Starmer, Kemi Badenoch. She hasn't quite given me an answer to that. This one from Dryden's Lawnmowers says, I would choose Nigel Farage to run the country. Unfortunately, Claire won't agree.
No, I wouldn't agree, actually. I think, I don't think Nigel Farage would be a good Prime Minister. I think Nigel Farage is... Because he's too in it for himself, he's too selfish. And
aren't all Prime Ministers selfish?
No, I think you need to be power hungry, power crazy, and a bit on the spectrum. But I don't think
that's
Nigel Farage...
very true, actually.
Yeah, I know. I speaketh the trutheth, and that's why I don't think Farage would be good for the country as Prime Minister.
It's interesting, isn't it? The Prime Minister's job, he is a minister. He is a prime
He's a servant.
minister. He's the first minister of a collective.
To serve
of a cabinet.
The king in this case, and to serve the country. I don't think...
So the leader of this country isn't a president.
Exactly.
There's a difference.
Exactly. They're a public servant.
Let's go through this morning's front pages. If you are just waking up, the time is 6:53. It is all about Heathrow this morning. The front page of the Times. Heathrow chaos puts bosses in firing line. This is the National Grid and Heathrow bosses are under pressure last night to explain, and quite rightly, how an electrical substation fire shut Europe's busiest airport, leaving passengers facing delays of travel chaos. Just to let you know, 1,300 flights affected, 300,000 people. Just think about that. 1/3 people stuck all over the world in different places. People were coming here. I saw this terrible interview with a lady, actually, who was coming back for her father's funeral.
A German couple?
No, she was English, but she was coming back for her father's funeral. Plane gets diverted, turn round. You miss things like funerals or weddings or whatever it is. Anyway, so people want to know what on earth is going on here. Airline bosses are said to be furious. Of course, compensation. I'm going to be talking to Lisa Minnow later, actually. That's at 9 o'clock, who's head of travel at The Sun, to talk about compensation if you are actually called. What can you do? What are your rights, given what has happened? So airline bosses said to be furious. Passengers are not due compensation, but associated costs, including additional flights and accommodation bills, are expected to cost airline millions of pounds. Heathrow says, well, we can't guard against this 100% of the time. We did have backup generators. Well, they weren't very good, were they?
No, I mean, to use that as an excuse in this day and age is just ridiculous. It really is. And I think the British Airport Authority, BAA, has to be accountable because they run Heathrow, don't they? And they should be made to be accountable. They should be insured against this happening. Hospitals have got backup generators. You know, operations still happen if the power goes down. Why can't we still run an airport? We should have had a backup for this substation, and this substation should not be used for domestic energy as well.
But also, why is your backup substation on the site of your substation? That seems to be ridiculous.
ridiculous.
To me. Let's move on and look through the Daily Telegraph because time is tight. A colossal failure of Heathrow blackout. I think that pretty much says it all. Thomas Waldby, the chief executive, says insisting backup systems were working as they should.
Well,
and they're not actually... Well, he says they're not designed to run the airport. Well, why aren't they? That's the question. Why are they not designed for that? The airport has its own biomass energy centre on site, but it only powers heating and air conditioning. That's really important.
The clue,
and doesn't actually operate... But it doesn't operate when the mains is off.
The clue for me is in his surname, the last syllable.
Bye.
Bye.
Heathrow, this is the eye. Heathrow chaos to last for days as the fire exposes UK weaknesses. Of course, we saw those flights starting to take off last night, but obviously you've got planes all in the wrong place. You've also got crew out of hours, so they can't then actually man those aircraft to get back into the right position. And, of course, the advice is to check with your airline before you even attempt to go to the airport.
Well, good luck trying to get through to them.
Well, that's right. Good luck with that. Chaos and anger as fire shuts Heathrow Airport. That's the front page of The Guardian. The Mirror this morning. The Mirror has one word, grounded. Heathrow Airport, they're talking about just the vulnerability. And this goes back to a much bigger issue, which is vulnerability of critical national infrastructure. And Heathrow Airport is designated as a site of critical national infrastructure.
It's been exposed.
Well, it's been exposed. Not only that, we are a laughing stock of the world. And, in fact, there were American anchors on American television yesterday just poking fun at the United Kingdom. The Daily Mail summarises this beautifully, I think, with one word: farcical. The Daily Express has a very different headline this morning. Britain must not abandon our last World War II heroes. I totally agree. The Daily Express stands with veterans today in urging Sir Keir Starmer not to abandon the few Second World War heroes left, but to pay for them to honour lost comrades. The plea to the Prime Minister comes after funds from an earlier government scheme dried up. The old soldiers fear they may miss events this summer, the 80th anniversary of VE Day, which falls on May the 8th. And finally, the Daily Star this morning. It's a very odd headline. Scatter cushions just say no. This is Adrian Chiles. Telegrouch Adrian Chiles has finally said something sensible. He wants to get rid of every scatter cushion on Earth in a giant bonfire. Let's have a heated debate. So his point is that because people have been to fancy hotels where you have cushions over the bed, you know, where it's all plumped up, that people are now taking that home. So his wife, I believe it is, has scatter cushions all over the bed. So he's grumpy and he throws all the cushions. He's like, I want to get in bed, throwing all the cushions onto the floor.
Well, go to bed earlier and you can do it.
That's right. Scatter cushions, are you a fan?
I'm a big fan.
I quite like a scatter cushion.
I love a scatter cushion.
Do you?
I do.
Yes, does it need to match the windows?
Not the windows, because the windows are clean.
Yeah, not the windows, the curtains. You can leave.
Compliment.
Lots of you getting in touch. I'm asking this morning, if you could choose anyone at all in this country, or indeed around the world, who would you actually choose to run this country? The number 0344 499 1000. Text the word talk in your message to 87222. You can also message us on X at talkTV. Loads more still to come this morning. In the next hour, we'll talk about some other big stories with Claire, also our sport with Tom Clayton coming up, and then we're going to be talking about critical infrastructure.
I can announce this government will begin the biggest sustained increase in defence spending since the end of the Cold War. We will deliver our commitment to spend 2.5% of GDP on defence, but we will bring it forward so we reach that level in 2027.
The answer from European capitals has been as resounding as it is clear. We are in an era of rearmament to respond to the short-term urgency to act and to support Ukraine, but also to address the long-term need to take on more responsibility for our own European security.
On Saturday, we also agreed a new £2.2 billion loan for Ukraine, backed not by the British taxpayer, but by the profits from frozen Russian assets. It is my pleasure to bring from His Majesty the King a letter. He sends his best wishes and his regards, of course, but he also asked me to bear this letter and bring it to you. So can I present the letter from the King to you?
Thank you very much. Am I supposed to read it right now?
Yeah, please do.
I will do.
I've got to tell him what your reaction is, so I need to know. I need to know.
He is a great gentleman. A great, great gentleman. He said he thinks the war's going to go on for a long time, and he better not be right. Well, I just think he should be more appreciative, because this country has stuck with them through thick and thin. We've given them much more than Europe, and Europe should have given more than us, because as you know, that's right there, that's the border.
What kind of diplomacy, JD, you are speaking about? What do you mean?
I'm talking about the kind of diplomacy that's going to end the destruction of your country.
Yes, but if you are not
Mr. President, with respect, I think it's disrespectful for you to come into the Oval Office and try to litigate this in front of the American media.
You're gambling with the lives of millions of people. You're gambling with World War III. You're gambling with World War III.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good morning to you just after 7 o'clock on Saturday, March the 22nd. I'm David Bull and I'm back. A very good morning to showbiz Mitch in Spain as well. Great to see you over the last few days. Great news for you if you are just waking up. It's International Day of the Seal. That's right. It's a day that celebrates the marine mammal. They vary in size from 40 kilos to more than 3,600 kilos. So if you're sitting at home and wondering how big is 3,600 kilos, in old money, it's 566 stone, 12 pounds and 10 ounces. That makes you a very big boy. Now, in the wild, the grey seal can live up to 35 years and sleep underwater. Yeah. Also, it's As Young As You Feel Day. Now, this is a day for those of you who constantly use excuses not to do anything by going, oh, I'm too old. Well, today is a day to rebel and stop worrying about what others think. I'm too old. And yes, thank you. And happy birthday to a legend. This man really is a legend. He's an English composer. He is a theatre producer. I think he's quite an extraordinary man, actually. Andrew Lloyd Webber is 77 today. A very happy birthday to you. That's a cat. Let's move on to this hour's fascinating facts.
Today's fascinating facts.
So some new ones for you this hour. On this day in 1888, the English Football League was founded when 12 clubs met at a hotel in Fleet Street in London. On this day, the first rugby international between France and England in Paris ended with a 35-0 victory to England. And on this day in 1912, the birth of someone called Wilfrid Bramble. He was an Irish film and television actor, best known for his role as Albert Steptoe in the television series Steptoe and Son. He also performed alongside the Beatles in their film A Hard Day's Night, playing Paul McCartney's fictional grandfather and playing Ebenezer Scrooge in a musical version of A Christmas Carol. And those are this hour's fascinating facts.
Waking up to the sound of the beat, David Bull on the radio can't be beat. From 6 to 10, life feels complete.
Good morning. 5 minutes past 7 feels complete because Claire Muldoon, everyone's favourite Scot, joins me this morning. Good morning. Hello.
How are you?
Good. How are you?
Good. I'm very well.
Good.
Good to have you back.
Well, thank you very much. I was only away for a week.
Was it only a week?
Yeah.
God, it seemed like longer.
Well,
I thought it was 2 weekends.
So I went to Spain, and it poured with rain.
The rain is rain in Spain.
Stays mainly on the plate. Well, let me tell you, it didn't. It was monsoon. It was biblical.
Really?
Yeah.
My
and
goodness me.
Dean, my producer this morning, he was there as well. Well, not with me, but he was actually out. in sunny Benidorm.
Was he out?
Yeah, well, it wasn't sunny either, no, but I think he had fun in Benidorm.
What did you do? Who did you meet?
I actually went out there to work, and then I had the odd day off. I met Showbiz Mitch, who I mentioned earlier on, and we had a very fun time, and we celebrated St Patrick's Day whilst we were there.
Yes, because that was last week.
Yes,
Monday.
so I got a marvellous green sparkly hat.
What, just add to your collection, no?
Exactly. Well, that's very true, actually. Yeah. Right, well, let's move on and talk about the big stories this morning. If you are just waking up, let me just show you the front pages. The Times, Heathrow chaos puts bosses in the firing line. The Telegraph, colossal failure of Heathrow blackout. The Eye, Heathrow chaos is going to last for days as fire exposes UK weaknesses. Chaos and anger as the fire shuts Heathrow Airport. Grounded is the front page of the Mirror. And the Daily Mail, one word, farcical. This is Europe's busiest airport. 1,300 flights were moved, were delayed, were turned around. 300,000, a third of a million passengers are caught up in abject chaos due to this substation catching fire, which are quite extraordinary scenes. The backup substation is located on the same site as the substation. Now, which bright spark came up with that? Apparently, also, there are lots of questions here. What did National Grid know? Why did it take so long to reroute the power? What did Heathrow Airport know? Why haven't they invested in having their own power source, whether that, as someone very cleverly said, an SMR, for example, or indeed having some sort of heating, some sort of electricity backup generator, as other international airports do? It also, Claire, begs other questions like, should we have a third runway at Heathrow, or do we actually invest in having a new airport where we have increased capacity? So when one airport goes down, you can then divert flights to another airport. And I'm thinking particularly of the Thames Estuary Airport.
Yeah, I know. You mentioned that earlier, and it does seem to be quite a good idea. Did you intentionally to use the word which bright spark?
I didn't.
Well, there you are. Nothing's lost on me. I thought that was very good.
Thank you.
Anyway, we don't have any money for anything. We've already committed to the third runway at Heathrow, plus improving Gatwick and Luton. But unless this private company, BAA, who are owned by whomever, that it's not British owned, can get their money out and start investing in their own infrastructure, I don't think we can even have the discussion to move on.
So we were talking about the ownership, and Heathrow is designated as critical national infrastructure. Yeah. It's owned by a French private equity group. It's owned by, I believe, the Qataris as well. There are real issues here in terms of Heathrow, and I do understand this at some point. By the way, they paid a dividend to all their shareholders recently for the first time. Of course they did.
A bit like the water companies, eh?
Yeah.
They're going bust,
but
they can still
sewage in the water. But there are real issues here. So they don't, and you can understand it from a business point of view, they don't want to invest in Heathrow until they get the third runway approved. Now they've got the third runway approved. But this goes back to a much bigger infrastructure issue. We never make any decisions.
No.
So everything is short-termist. It's 5 years. Well, all of this.
All of it.
We need a Department for National Infrastructure where you have a 25, 50-year plan. You say, this is what we're doing, and we're getting on with it.
And you commit to it.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Why don't we do that?
Do you know what? That would actually bring in a lot of work, lot of labour, a lot of skill that we have in this country. So we should do it. We should train young people who are disenfranchised. We should train those people that are not in work at the moment for whatever reason and say to them, look, this is what we need. Let's build the country back up.
Yeah.
It would give a bit of pride as well, which is lacking.
So just to double check, Heathrow is owned by a consortium of foreign investors, a French private equity firm, Saudi Arabia and Qatar, as I said. And of course, they have been fighting for airport expansion. Now, the chief executive of Heathrow has said, well, we did very well. You can't prepare for this kind of eventuality.
Well, I'm sorry, you can. It's your job.
Well, I would have thought it's your job, particularly if you're paid about $600,000. I was thinking, I'm very happy to be head of Heathrow Airport for $600,000, and I'll come up with some sort of contingency planning for the airport. But again, it's also embarrassing. The transformer, there is one other part to this. The transformer, apparently, was incredibly old. An experienced electrical engineer blamed the catastrophic failure on an oil-filled transformer. So they have 25,000 litres of cooling oil which ignited, which seems extraordinary in this day and age. It was running at 106% capacity. Well, there's your answer, isn't it? It's overloaded.
Basic physics.
But this is also because we're not investing in critical national infrastructure like electricity. Meanwhile, Mad Ed thinks the answer to Heathrow's problems is to have another couple of windmills.
Oh, I know, or solar panels.
Or solar panels.
You know, let's the farmers, you know, not be able to pay their inheritance tax over 10 years because they don't get enough income and whatever. And then in order to pay for the inheritance tax, they'll need to sell off their farms. Oh, I wonder who to.
Well, and just in terms of that, just in terms of where this goes, Ed Miliband made this comment saying, well, it looks like there is some vulnerability at Heathrow Airport. But your whole policies, Ed, are about making the UK increasingly vulnerable. Because if we don't have cheap energy, you can't underwrite anything that we do in this country. And yet his big idea is to stick solar panels on NHS hospitals and on schools. And of course, those solar panels are made, guess where? China.
China, yeah. With coal.
And you made a great point about that.
Yeah.
So they've got to be shipped here, haven't they?
They've got to be shipped here, but not only that. Those solar panels are manufactured using coal.
Yeah.
Right at the coal face. The irony of ironies. They are stacking up and you can't make them up because they're there.
Let's also just mention this idea of counter-terrorism, because the counter-terrorist police are involved in this. I think we are not being told everything. Now, clearly they are concerned that there may be some sort of terrorist link here. Do you think that is valid?
I think it's valid that they're involved because they have to do a quick run-through, they have to have a quick look round. And they need to know, because if they weren't, and something like that, it did come to light a few months, maybe even a few days down the line, then everyone would be up in arms saying, why weren't they there? Why didn't we know? Who's looking after the security of this country? We are so vulnerable to attacks. We had the NHS data leak. We had the NHS IT glitch. So we're vulnerable. But personally, I don't think it is an act of terrorism. I think it's just, you know, us.
Incompetence.
Absolutely and utterly. And, you know, it's complete and utter incompetence.
Yeah. Let's move on and talk about the economy, because, as you will know, it's the spring statement on Wednesday, and Rachel Reeves has really got very little room for manoeuvre because she has these fiscal rules.
Wiggle room.
Well, no, exactly. Now, according to the latest figures, the Treasury is on track to miss official forecasts for public borrowing by £63 billion, according to projections made before Labour came to power. A think tank has warned. This is the ONS. It says public sector net borrowing, excluding banks in the 11 months to February, overshot projections by the OBR by more than 20 billion quid. The Treasury has actually borrowed 132.2 billion so far this financial year, according to the ONS, compared with the budget of 111 billion. So Treasury borrowing could come in at 151 billion, which will be 23 billion more than the OBR's forecast. Now, let's just look at the state of the British economy. So when you look at 2024, we grew by 0.7%. That's slower than the US, France or Canada, by the way, which is hardly a marvellous thing that we've managed to achieve. The OBR is about to downgrade our economic growth prospects from 2% down to 1%. The reason that this is so concerning is the OBR is normally very positive. So the fact they're now saying we are downgrading the British economy. Meanwhile, of course, Labour has levied 40 billion quid's worth of tax increases on people in this country. We've talked about employers' national insurance contributions. They haven't even come in. They come in April the 6th. People, companies, SMEs, pubs, restaurants are laying people off because they cannot afford it. And Rachel Reeves is responsible.
She is responsible for this because she, in her autumn budget, increased employers' national insurance contributions. I mean, they were very savvy. They said, we will not touch national insurance contributions privately. But for companies, it's going to hit them because they need to pay their employees.
I think they were disingenuous.
Very disingenuous in the wording. And Labour is supposed to be, for work. That's why when women go into Labour, they have a baby, because it's hard work. This Labour government has got nothing to do with work. It's got nothing to do with manufacturing, helping aspiring. It's got nothing. If anything, it's disabling, and it's ridiculous, and it has to stop. I honest to goodness me, I don't know what the answer is. I would love them not to be.
Well, the
in power.
answer is not to increase the national insurance contribution.
A lot of SMEs, it's going to cost them over £100,000 extra this year.
But surely what any forward-thinking independent country post-Brexit would do is to slash the rates of tax, because that way you empower people to make more money, your point about aspiration, so therefore you attract inward investment into the United Kingdom. Isn't that the answer?
Do you know what it also gives people, David? Confidence. If you've got money, you've got confidence, and therefore the next step then is to be an entrepreneur. You've then got confidence to start something up. We need to move away from, we're not a manufacturing country anymore, fintechs, coding, AI, that's the way to go. So if you can find an in-way into those industries, you will make loads of money. But it's taking that confidence. If you don't have the money, if you're worrying when your lease is up in your rental, if you're worrying if you can't pay your next mortgage payment, if you're worrying you can't get your child into a school, if you're worrying in Birmingham, as we've seen this week, that your rubbish is not being collected, the risk of health issues reigning from that are mammoth. They're huge, almost as big as that seal you were talking about earlier.
Yeah.
They really are gargantuan.
How much of this do you think is down to inexperience? If you look at the Cabinet, I'm going to say none of them, or very few of them, have ever had a real job, have never really...
Yeah, we've discussed this ad nauseum.
So I think that underpins everything, because as you mentioned with entrepreneurs, it is a risk.
Yeah.
It is a massive risk.
Yeah.
You put your own money in, it is at stake, you work really hard, there are no days off, but you can reap rewards.
Yes.
Now, why would you have a risk culture like that if the government is going to take all your cash?
Exactly. There is no carrot, there's no stick, there's no nothing.
I can pretty much guarantee Rachel Reeves will stand up on Wednesday and blame Donald Trump, the shifting sands of the global economy, and not take any responsibility.
I agree. And do you know what? You know all these COP28s and Davos things and everything else? I wish that outage just happened then. And then we wouldn't have been forced into these positions. That the World Economic Forum and all these... I mean, why does Bill Gates go to Davos? Why do actors go to Davos? Will.i.am's been there, Matt Damon's been there. Why?
So having thought about my question, who would you have running this country?
No, I think I'd go to Madame Tussauds and pick up a waxwork, because you'd get more sense. At least you could melt
Anyone
it.
historical?
I can't think.
All right, I'll come back to you in a minute.
I'm just so angry about it.
Well, I agree. Thanks for the moment, Claire. I'm asking this question this morning, and it just got me thinking, given the dearth of talent that we have, the lack of talent that we have in this country, it seems, in terms of governance, if you could choose anyone, and it can be anyone from this country or indeed around the world, to run this country, to put Britain back on the map, to actually have some aspiration and sense of direction, who would you choose to run this country? 0344 499 1000, those calls charged at the national rate. You can text the word talk in your message to 87222. You can also message us on X. After the break, I want to talk about immigration, because Keir Starmer is not exactly doing a great job. 343 illegal migrants arrived on British shores in 24 hours. If you look at that, that is equivalent to 3 full-to-capacity Premier Inn hotels. Immigration is out of control. We're going to talk about that next here on Weekend Breakfast.
Keir Starmer can't even protect Britain's borders, never mind Ukraine's. You will remember, Alex, a few years ago when the British Army advertised for snowflakes. I mean, they literally put out recruitment posters which said, if you're a snowflake, we want you, because they want your emotional intelligence and your sense of fairness, etc. So we've got a fighting force in this country that has gone very politically correct, that celebrates snowflakery, which actually looks down its nose at toxic masculinity. And by the way, we wouldn't have won any war in history without so-called toxic masculinity.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back. This is Talk 723. The lovely Claire Muldoon joins me this morning. Let me just bring you some breaking news. The first flights of the day are starting to land again at Heathrow Airport. Services have resumed after a day of chaos. 9 flights scheduled to land this morning have already seen cancellations. Thousands grounded on Friday after the fire at the nearby electrical substation brought Europe's busiest airport to a standstill for most of the day. I think the point is here, why was it not better developed? What was the feedback mechanism? Why was there no power? And the fact is they're paying a CEO a lot of money, and then obviously it all fell apart. Let's take a caller. Barry is on the phone from Norwich. Good morning, Barry.
Good morning, David. Good morning, Claire.
Good morning, Barry. We're very well, thank you.
So what's your take on this? Look, it's the biggest airport in Europe. One would expect there would be contingency planning. If the power goes down at a substation, for example, if there's a fire, then surely you have backup generators that kick in immediately and so don't disrupt flights for 1/3 people. We are a laughingstock around the world.
I was amazed, to be frank, that they had no backup system. I could not believe that the busiest airport in Europe, with flights taking off every 35 to 45 seconds, had no backup. You know, and I'd just like to congratulate the air traffic controllers and the pilots, who must have had an absolute nightmare. Yeah, with them screens going out, yeah, right, and getting them planes off to land places. And I don't think that was a terrorist attack. I don't think any terrorist would think it's that easy.
I mean, it is extraordinary. It does beg enormous questions about our critical national infrastructure, and Heathrow is designated as a site of critical national importance. One would expect, therefore, that you ring-fence power, that you have your own power supply to Heathrow Airport to ensure that something like this never happens. So in hospitals, and Claire made this point earlier, you have backup generators, because you can't have people who are being ventilated suddenly not ventilated. It's not rocket science.
I think someone's head has to roll for this, because, you know, it's a derelict duty. There is people's lives in danger up in them planes, you know, and someone's head's got to go for this. It has to. You know, there's just no excuse for it. I mean, an airport of like that, to go out like that with a fire in a substation is just beyond ridiculous.
So where do you attribute blame? Do you attribute blame to the national grid or to Heathrow itself?
I don't think this has come just now. I think this is previous governments. That no one ever puts money in infrastructure in this country. I mean, you just have to.
But it's run by a private company.
Yeah, but well, you know, there should be a backup system there. Surely, you know, it just makes sense. Like you say, in hospitals, backup systems. You know, it's just mad.
You see, what the investors are saying is they haven't invested in Heathrow because they haven't had the go ahead for the 3rd runway because of government intransigence or repeated government intransigence, and you can kind of understand that. Isn't the issue here that we just lack long-term planning for critical infrastructure in this country?
The issue is we can't build anything in this country. It's as simple as that.
Why can't? Well, we do. We have the skills. We just don't have.
Everything takes so long for planning. It takes years. It's inquiries, and it's just crazy how we can't build anything.
But surely, Barry, this isn't actually a question of investment. Surely, they don't fly from Heathrow between midnight and, say, 5 o'clock in the morning. Surely they should be doing ISO tests, which is the new health and safety regulation, that actually generators work. Surely they should be able to shut down Heathrow and log on and move on to the substation's equivalent of power. That doesn't seem to be happening.
Yeah, but of course, do you know what I mean? But it's just not happening from one way. I just find it absolutely disgraceful.
But also, there's another interesting facet to this, which is this quest for net zero. Because if we don't invest in the infrastructure and energy infrastructure in this country, and quite frankly, sticking some windmills in the North Sea isn't going to cut it. Therefore, this is, I think, going to change people's opinions about this madness of net zero. Do you think it changes people's opinion, and do you think it changes government policy?
I don't think this government will change policy for love or money, to be frank. My opinion is net zero was dead in the water from day one, to be honest. But can I just mention about bringing someone back who...
to run the country.
So I've been asking this morning, who would you bring back, or who, anyone in the world, to run this country? Who would you have?
Well, first of all, I'll bring back Guy Fawkes to finish the job to start.
Right, OK.
Maybe he did. Maybe that was the problem with the substation, Barry.
And I think... I know she's dead, but the last leader of this country who did not want to make friends with anyone, who just wanted to live, was Thatcher. There's been no one like it since Thatcher.
So that's so funny. We had a conversation in the office before we came on air, and we all said that will be the #1 option.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, everyone now who leaves apart from Donald Trump wants to be everyone's friend. I want someone in Downing Street who doesn't want to be everyone's friend, who wants to put the people of this country first. I mean, the benefits cuts that they cut, they should stop spending millions on these illegal migrants. Hotels, money a week, new clothes, game stations.
But where do you sit politically, Barry? Where do you sit politically? Because I'm politically homeless.
I'm not homeless. I'm voting reform.
OK.
Yeah, because I want the two of these main parties I want out. It's time for someone else.
I told you, Claire Muldoon.
These two have had to go. For the Conservatives and Labour have been doing it for years, haven't they? They can't do it.
Barry, always good to talk to you. Thank you very much for your call this morning. That's Barry in sunny Norwich. Let's move on and actually talk about what Barry mentioned there, which is immigration. So I saw this last night. 343 illegal migrants arrived yesterday. Just yesterday.
How many?
343. Now, when you look at that, that is 3 Premier Inn or any other brand of hotel ram full that has arrived in this country in 24 hours.
How do they measure them, though?
So, well, they count them, don't they? Because obviously the border force, the border taxi service, bring them in, and so they count them. Let's just look at the numbers that have come in. So 5,025 illegal migrants have come to this country so far this year. That is up 24% on last year. We've got nearly 40,000 sitting in hotels around the country. And by the way, that's why hotels are so expensive, because, of course, they're all being paid for by the Home Office. We've got 42,000 outstanding immigration appeals, and, of course, many of them citing Article 8 of the ECHR. Now, Labour, as you remember, came to power and got rid of the Rwanda policy. Now, there's a big story this morning in the Daily Mail. Excuse me. Labour is considering plans to deport... Now, this is the devil's in the detail. Failed asylum seekers, wait for this, to the Balkans and lock them in detention centres. I thought the whole point of the Rwanda issue that they had was about keeping people in locked detention centres and things like the Scampton and Wethersfield and all of that. I thought that's what Labour objected to. Anyway... So apparently asylum seekers who have failed could be sent to return hubs in the Western Balkans, like Albania, Serbia, Bosnia, North Macedonia. These plans are being drawn up by Sir Keir Starmer. And, of course, this is whilst the Netherlands are talking to Uganda. I mean, every other country seems to be doing something. Albania has 2 empty migrant detention centres because Italy pulled out of it, so there is capacity there. Aren't they reinventing the wheel?
Of course, they're reinventing the wheel, but the reason that the Rwandan flights didn't take off was because the political prisoners were actually given legal counsel.
Citing Article 8.
Yeah, sorry, citing Article 8, and that Rwanda was not a safe place for them to go to. That's why that was upheld.
So the difference with this is that they only are going to deport failed asylum seekers. Yeah. That squares with Keir Starmer's belief, doesn't it?
Wow. But actually, there might be something in this, because there have been rumours, there has been research, there is some evidence to suggest that the Albanian criminal gangs are people trafficking. So in order to send them back, it might just be to, you know, to come out and stop the business model of it happening. So it might be to smash the gangs.
Oh, I'm glad you mentioned smashing the gangs, because Keir Starmer has made a great deal and a great play about smashing the gangs, hasn't he?
Yeah, he has.
Let's remind ourselves of what our great esteemed leader has said.
You will have helped to smash the gangs, secure our borders, and save countless lives. Smash the criminal gangs, and they are criminal gangs, that are running this vile trade and putting people in the boats. Take those gangs down. I think smashing the gangs that are taking people's money is a deterrent. I think you have to smash those gangs. The only way to stop that is to smash the gangs that are running this vile trade. Smash the gangs.
Smash. When are you going to do it then?
I didn't even know that was coming up.
No,
how
well
good
done.
I am for
yeah,
you.
You're very good, yeah. Great segue. But I mean, look, he's embarrassing, isn't he? Because all I hear is 20 billion fiscal hole, smash the gangs. No action. Nothing.
Well, no, there is nothing. I mean, I can't say any more than I have done.
What's the answer? Come on, you're in charge, because someone said you're now running this country. What would you do? So when you look at these numbers, 5,000 people coming here illegally this year alone, despite the fact that we've said you're not welcome in this country, what would you do?
Right, I don't have the capacity to take anyone else in, OK? I wouldn't let them in. But
how would you
I want to break down the reason why they're leaving, where they're leaving
You're sounding like a politician.
We have to, because I doubt if there's many women and children there. It's mostly young men, I would assume.
Of economic age, yeah.
Of economic age.
Yeah.
So I don't want them here because I can't deal with what I've got here. I can't look after my own people, so therefore I'm not going to take anyone else's problem. But I want to know where they're coming from, why they're leaving, and why they want to come to Britain.
There's quite an interesting discussion at the moment about revisiting some of the European Union's judgments, the ECHR judgments and Article 8 and all the rest of it. I'm starting to sense Kemi Badenoch changing her position on that as well. Of course, Reform and Nigel Farage very clear on where we should stand on that. But is that the answer?
I don't know, but I would want to speak to Giorgia Meloni, because I think Italy have got a horrific problem.
They have huge problems.
Lampedusa, 2 years ago, overtaken by young African men, and a lot of other parts of Italy as well. They've got the bulging borders between Turkey and Belarus. You know, you've got the issue with the Ukraine war and Russia at the moment. Tectonic plates are shifting. Really, very, very much. And we've got, it's just horrific. The amount, but these are, I just don't even know where to start. I mean, it's human life, it's human beings. We all have, you know, a right to shelter and right to food and whatever, but we cannot do that to our own people here.
But you don't have a right to be an economic migrant.
No, you don't. You don't. And unless you are fleeing from a war-torn country and your life is at risk and you are seeking asylum, then please don't bother coming to my door.
I want to talk more about that after the break, actually, about some of the headlines that made the news whilst I was away, particularly Kemi Badenoch saying I'm not going to reunite the right with Farage. Also, I want to look at the latest polls. Just before we do go to the break, though, there's been this great controversy about whether you can live on £70 a week, and there's an article this morning in the Telegraph. Number 10 won't say if Starmer could live on £70 a week.
Well, you know,
on the disability
No
benefit?
one can.
Of course they can't.
Why is the question even being posed? It's a bit like the gotcha moment to Cameron or Boris Johnson. How much is a pint of milk? I don't need my Prime Minister to know how much a pint of milk is.
I think you do.
No, I don't. I really don't, because they're never going to go into a shop and buy it. Are they, realistically?
But surely it's important. Margaret Thatcher knew the price of a pint of milk.
Because she was a greengrocer's daughter.
But isn't this the problem? That
We've got the son of a toolmaker, didn't you know that?
Yeah, well, I do know that. But also, this is part of the problem, because if you don't know the price of a pint of milk, you don't actually understand how real people live.
No, I want them to be able to run the country.
Well, I do too,
okay,
but I think you should know the price of a pint of milk.
No one can know. No one can live on £70 a week.
I would agree. But Keir Starmer refusing to say. Claire, thank you for the moment. I'm asking this morning if you could choose anyone at all from this country, around the world, to run this country, because quite frankly, someone needs to. Who would you choose and why? Martin Lewis would be the perfect person to run the country, says Mark. Thank you for that. This one is Paul in Colchester. David, if I could have anyone run the UK, it would be Donald Trump and JD Vance. They're the ones with the backbone to do what needs to be done. No nonsense, no pandering, just action. They would clean house, cut through the woke nonsense and put the country back on track. Strong leadership is what Britain desperately needs, as these two wouldn't shy away from making the tough calls. Keep all of those messages coming in. One more. Good morning, David and Claire. This is Brian in Worthing. Good morning. David, who would I have running the country? You, David, of course.
That's all he was waiting for. He's waited for almost 2 hours. He posed the question,
Well, now 38 minutes.
and I got there first, and he couldn't believe it. I can always tell the change in David's voice when a message comes in for him.
Right, you can leave. Claire, thank you for the moment. After the break, I want to talk about, I don't know if you've seen it, but this drama Adolescence. It is extraordinary, actually. It's amazing acting. It's all done in one pass, which means the camera, it's in one take, essentially, and the camera moves through these protagonists, and it really is brilliant.
I watched the first episode last night.
Oh, well done.
After your message.
I want to talk about that, and I want to talk about this idea of male toxic masculinity. And also, do you know what your children or grandchildren are saying on mobile phones using emojis? I had no idea. We'll talk about that after this break. This is Weekend Breakfast. Good morning.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Back 7:41, Saturday, March the 22nd. The lovely Claire Muldoon joins me this morning here on Weekend Breakfast. Let's talk about this drama. It is everywhere. Whilst I was away, I did actually watch it. It's called Adolescence. Prime Minister, they talked about it in the House of Commons as well. Keir Starmer said there's a need to tackle the emerging and growing problem raised by new TV drama Adolescence. It was co-written and starring actor Stephen Graham from Kirby and Merseyside. If you haven't seen it, do watch it. It's a really clever piece. It's been penned brilliantly, and it talks basically tells the story of a family who's I need to be careful I don't give it away, but where their lives are blown apart when their teenage son is then arrested for allegedly killing a classmate. I think I haven't given anything away at that point. But what this does rather brilliantly is shines a light on the pressures that young, particularly boys, are under. And what were your thoughts when you watched it?
So I have read a lot about it. I am an incredible fan of Stephen Graham and Jack Thorne, who both wrote it. And Stephen Graham plays the young boy's father in this. And him and his wife, Harriet Walters, not Harriet Walters, Stephen Graham's wife and him co-produced the piece. What we have to remember is this is a piece of drama, OK? It's not a documentary.
No.
So when people get on their high horses and say, why weren't, you know, they bring the race card into it, why wasn't this boy black? It's based on this, it's based on that. Sorry,
but I don't see race as an issue at all in this.
I do not see race as an issue in this
So don't give away the plot
to.
for those people who don't know what happens at the end of it. I thought the first three were incredibly powerful. I didn't particularly enjoy the last episode of that. But one of these terms that came up, incel, I'll admit it, I had absolutely no idea what anyone was talking about. And this stands for involuntary celibate. Do you want to just explain your understanding of that?
So this term, and I remember covering it on another news channel about almost 3 years ago now, in a shooting in America. And it was, the perpetrator, the killer, was white, but that doesn't matter. White young lad who spent a lot of time in their own room, was very insular in themselves, and they were celibate. And this involuntary celibate became incel, and that's where the term has come from.
So they, according to this, it's a radical misogynist who believes they are an involuntary celibate. And they also talk about that, I can't remember which way around it is, that 80% of men are attracted to 20% of women or thereabouts, or whatever it is. But what it talks about is this toxic masculinity, and you and I have spoken in the past about Andrew Tate and so on, but essentially it highlights online male radicalisation and violence against girls. This is very complex to unpick, and talking to young men, there seemed to be a lack of role models, the availability of social media, the stuff they're watching.
Well, it's porn.
Porn.
It's porn, and the way that young boys think that women want, or young girls want to be treated, objectifying themselves, and the fact that, you know, they can read statistics, how many rapes actually go to court, no means no, you can't do that, you can't do this, and everything is caught. There is so much pressure on them, both male and female, that the internet has given them an absolute pathway, not only onto the dark web, but in ways that they feel that people ought to be behaving. It's all in the behaviour. And when they go to school, there are no parameters, there's no discipline, everyone wants to outdo one another, everything is caught, they've all got phones, everything is caught, everything is recorded, and it's there ad infinitum, and that is wrong. There is no security and there's no confidence. And I alluded to that earlier as well. Confidence in people can give them so much, not in an Andrew Tate thing, because Andrew Tate did not pull the trigger. Andrew Tate did not hold the knife. Andrew Tate did not hold that crossbow. It was these evil men.
Gareth Southgate talks about the culture of toxic masculinity, and he said young men are spending too much time gaming, gambling, watching pornography. They need better role models. They do, without a doubt. how much of this is also down to a lack of aspiration, a feeling of helplessness? There's nowhere to go, there is no future.
No, absolutely. I do think that. But this is a build-up. It doesn't happen overnight.
No, sure.
Right? So we've had lockdown, where young lads were locked up. What were they doing? What were they watching?
Has a lot to answer.
It's got a lot
5
to
years
answer.
ago tomorrow, by the way, lockdown.
Really?
Yeah.
Well, we're reaping the rewards from it now, aren't we?
We really are.
We really are.
Let's just pause and listen to what Gareth Southgate actually did say about this subject.
Young men are suffering. They're feeling isolated. They're grappling with their masculinity and with their broader place in society. As real-world communities and mentorship declines, young men end up withdrawing, reluctant to talk or express their emotions. They spend more time online searching for direction and are falling into unhealthy alternatives like gaming, gambling and pornography.
Let's also, one other thing that came out of this drama is when the son talks to the dad, who's the police officer, he talks about the fact that the father has completely missed the plot and he doesn't understand the emojis that are being, which are those characters that you use on a phone. I had no idea what these emojis actually meant. I think we've got a list here. So you can see here that basically the kids are communicating through these visual representations, graphic representations. So cocaine there is a fish.
Snowflake.
Well, there's a pill, by the way. So that pill is, it means that someone is an incel, it's involuntary celibate. I had no idea about that. There are lots of others, as you can see here. Cocaine is represented by things like snow or a fish, different types of drugs. The blue crystal is crystal meth, as far as I understand, injections, and then you've got that sort of wind thing, MDMA and ecstasy. They talk about dealing drugs, which is an 8-ball, which is an American term, that 8, the bowling ball. Eyes, as you can see, and sexting. This all means different stuff. So an aubergine, a cherry, a peach, all of the above. So I suppose what I'm trying to get across here is for parents and grandparents, just keep an eye on what your kids are actually sending each other, because I think many people don't know what any of this means. A purple heart means you're horny, a yellow heart means you're interested, a pink heart means I'm interested but not in sex.
Do you know the other thing though? I watched episode 1 of Adolescence last night. The child involved is 13. He
is incredible.
But yeah, the act. He's a super young actor. But 13. You know, you don't want your 13-year-old to even know what even these things
but
know.
you see,
and that's an issue.
But someone else said, and I heard them this morning, saying that no kid under 16 needs a smartphone. And I tend to agree.
They don't. We didn't have them.
We didn't have them at all. But I know with my nephew, who is much younger than 13, he knows far too much. He knows more than he should.
Well,
but they learn from each other. They learn from people at school.
But that's taking their innocence away. It really is.
Agree.
It really is. And they're not letting children be children.
I totally...
And they'll be burnt out by the time they're 21.
Yeah, I totally agree.
It's so sad.
It really is. Claire, thank you for the moment. So if you could choose anyone to run this country, because someone needs to, who would you choose? 0344 499 1000. After the break, Tom Clayton will be here with all the latest sporting headlines. This is Weekend Breakfast. Good morning.
way back in the 1940s. Herbert Morrison, who is he grandfather? I think
Of
he's
Mandelson.
grandfather of Peter Mandelson, famously says, "We're going to build the Conservatives out of London."
And he
in
succeeded.
other words, the deliberate creation of council houses. But now the ethnic composition has changed wildly. The old whites have moved out to new towns, and that sort of thing. The further East End and whatever, South Essex, all the rest of it, and the new groups have moved in.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back. This is Talk. Dan in Kent, one of our regulars. Wouldn't you be quiet? Dan in Kent, one of our regulars. Good morning. I think Postman Pat would do a better job at running the country than our woeful crop of politicians. At least he delivers. He got in there first. Claire Muldoon should be Prime Minister. What? She talks sense, and David, you can be her deputy. You gotta be kidding.
Wonder what the emoji for that would be.
Let me think. Great show. That's Tom Stewart in Morpeth in Northumberland. This is a better one. Jane Stockport. David, who would I choose to run the country? It's obviously you, David. I much prefer that.
We're at 2-2 at the moment.
Right, OK, let's
Tom,
move on.
who would you have?
No, he's not here. It's time for Tom Clayton's Sporting Weekend.
Tom Clayton's Sporting Weekend.
Now he's here. Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Question still stands.
Question still stands. Who would I get to run the country?
Between us.
Between you two.
Yeah.
I would emigrate
share.
outside of the country.
Yeah, I don't blame you.
Not the answer.
Right, should we talk about some sport? George Foreman.
George Foreman, yes. Very sad news overnight that he passed away. One of the great names of boxing, to be honest. Someone who, I mean, if you're aware of the Rumble in the Jungle in 1974, he was one of the...
I was 5.
A lot of people... I was...
Not
I won't
born.
go into that. Negative 21. But what can I say? You know, Muhammad Ali is always synonymous with that fight, but it's always easy to forget the other side of that, and that's George Foreman, who was such a fierce competitor. He was a 2-time world champion, and he won those world championships 21 years apart, which is pretty impressive. He was an Olympic gold medalist in 1968, and then in 1997 he made arguably one of the best career moves that he ever made.
I was about to say, the grill.
And he put his name to the George Foreman grill.
That's how I know who he is.
And more to the point, he has made significantly more money from grills than he did from being a world champion at boxing.
Yeah.
He's made almost... I think I was looking at some research the other day. I think by 2011 he'd made $200 million. $200 million in 12 years.
Good effort.
From selling grills.
Yeah.
Honestly, I am in the wrong career.
I think Rachel Reeves is as well. Maybe that's what she should do. Adopt a new grill, make a new grill.
No, she'd sell frying pans and say it's a grill.
Well, maybe she should sell accounting software or something. OK, very sad. Let's talk about Thomas Tuchel, because he is the first, hang on, let me get this right, the first German manager of England.
That's correct, yes. And last night we also had a couple of other firsts as well. First of all, I'll stop saying first in a second. Miles Lewis-Skelly, 18 years old, making his debut for England, scored a goal on his debut as well.
Fantastic.
Becomes the youngest ever goal-scoring debutant in English history. And then Harry Kane, who scored the second goal, becomes the first ever man to reach 70 goals for his country, which is the first ever Englishman.
How do you top that at 18?
It's incredible, isn't it?
Yes.
It's absolutely phenomenal. And he's burst onto the scene probably since January at Arsenal.
What's his... Oh, it's Arsenal, it's his club.
So he's come up through London Colney. Arsenal have had all sorts of problems with injuries this year, which means that they've had to dip into the youth team. All of a sudden they've unearthed this gem in Lewis Skelly, who's brilliant. He gets called up to England, starts his first game, scores in his first game, 20 minutes in, I mean, again, I'm in the wrong career. I'm in the wrong career. I should have done that when I was 18.
Well, yeah.
Yeah.
Why didn't you?
It is a very good question.
Yeah, it is. That's why I asked it.
Exactly.
Oh,
And I can't provide an answer. It's
right, okay. Well, so amazing stuff there. Let's talk. So today is a non-league day, Tom.
It is.
Yeah.
It is.
What's that mean?
I was waiting for that question.
Yeah.
So non-league day is something that happens on the first international break of every year. So now we're into March, we have the break, we have the pause, there's no Premier League, there's no Championship. So what's non-league clubs? So these are clubs who are outside of Premier League, Championship, League One and League Two, outside the English football leagues. So your local teams, things like that.
And the SPL?
Well, it's only England, actually, I'm afraid. But they basically come together. They offer season ticket holders of these bigger clubs discounted rates to come in and try and get more people through the doors of their local club.
Great.
Get more people in and get more people interested in it. And it's seen a massive rise in the last couple of years. There's been thousands more fans attending lower league games. I know when I go and see a game on a Saturday, I don't go and watch a Premier League game. I will quite happily go to my local club because the atmosphere is brilliant. It's what, without sounding too cliche, it's what football should be. It's so straightforward. It's the sort of slightly run-down stadiums with the terracing.
It's the Ted Lasso of football.
Well, no, it's not even the Ted Lasso of football, because Ted Lasso, the idea was when he came in and managed in the series, he managed at the top level. This is grassroots. This is people who are also working on job sites, people who are working elsewhere, who are also footballers, and have that goal of making it into the top.
Metaphorical and literal.
I think you have sold that rather brilliantly, young man. Thank you very much. That was Tom Clayton's Sporting Weekend.
Tom Clayton's Sporting Weekend.
Dear, lots of messages coming in. Sue in Oxfordshire, good morning to you. Hi, David and Claire. Your clip of Starmer saying "Smash the Gangs" made me laugh. I've always said he sounds like the aliens from the old Smash adverts.
Yeah.
Yes. And then they smash them all to bits.
Mash gets smashed.
Yes, you've got to be a certain age to actually know what we're talking about there. Claire, thank you so much.
You're very, very welcome.
That time has flown, hasn't it?
It has, hasn't it? It's been lovely.
Have you enjoyed it?
Really, I've had a great time.
Good. Well, thank you ever so much. You're always welcome to come back. So thank you very much. Lots more still to come on the programme. Keep all of those messages coming in, please, as well. So I'm asking this morning, if you could choose anyone, and it could be anyone, not just this country, but anyone at all, who would you pick to run the United Kingdom? Because someone needs to. 0344 499 1000. You can text the word talk in your message to 87222. Now, after the break, we're going to be speaking to security and intelligence expert at the University of Buckingham, Professor Julian Richards, about the Heathrow fire. Clearly, lots of things to consider here. Was this an act of terrorism? What does it say about our national infrastructure and our security? That's all still to come.
I can announce this government will begin the biggest sustained increase in defence spending since the end of the Cold War. We will deliver our commitment to spend 2.5% of GDP on defence, but we will bring it forward so we reach that level in 2027.
The answer from European capitals has been as resounding as it is clear. We are in an era of rearmament to respond to the short-term urgency to act and to support Ukraine, but also to address the long-term need to take on more responsibility for our own European security.
On Saturday, we also agreed a new £2.2 billion loan for Ukraine, backed not by the British taxpayer, but by the profits from frozen Russian assets. It is my pleasure to bring from His Majesty the King a letter. He sends his best wishes and his regards, of course, but he also asked me to bear this letter and bring it to you. So can I present the letter from the King to you?
Thank you very much. Am I supposed to read it right now?
Yeah, please do.
I will do.
I've got to tell him what your reaction is, so I need to know. I need to know.
He is a great gentleman. A great gentleman. He said he thinks the war's going to go on for a long time, and he better not be right. Well, I just think he should be more appreciative, because this country has stuck with them through thick and thin. We've given them much more than Europe, and Europe should have given more than us, because as you know, that's right there, that's the border.
What kind of diplomacy, JD, you are speaking about? What do you mean?
I'm talking about the kind of diplomacy that's going to end the destruction of your country.
Yes, but if you are not
Mr. President, with respect, I think it's disrespectful for you to come into the Oval Office and try to litigate this in front of the American media.
You're gambling with the lives of millions of people. You're gambling with World War III. You're gambling with World War III.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello, a very good morning to you. Just after 8 o'clock now on Saturday, March the 22nd. I'm David Bull. Do not fear, I have returned. Great news if you are just waking up, though. It is International Day of the Seal. That is right. Yes. It's a day that celebrates the marine mammal. Thank you. They vary in size from 40 kilos to more than 3,600 kilos. Now, if you're thinking, what on earth is that in old school money? That is 566 stone, 12 pounds and 10 ounces, which means they are very big boys indeed. Now, they can actually live, these are grey seals, up to 35 years and sleep underwater. Now, that's clever. Also, it's as young as you feel day. This is a day, essentially, for those of you who keep using this excuse, I'm too old, I can't do that. Well, today is a day to rebel and stop worrying about what other people think. Cry, baby. Also, yes. Happy birthday to a man who I think is a real legend, actually. An English composer, theatre producer. He's written 21 musicals, 2 film scores. He turns 77 today, and it's his birthday. Happy birthday to Andrew Lloyd Webber. That's a cat in cake. Didn't you have anything else, like Starlight Express or... No? Jesus Christ, you had a cat. That's the best you've got, is it? All right, brilliant. Let's move on to this hour's fascinating facts.
Today's fascinating facts.
So today's fascinating facts on this day in 1896, the death of Thomas Hughes. Well, who was he? Well, he was an English lawyer. He was also author of the novel Tom Brown's School Days, a semi-autobiographical novel or work set at Rugby School where he had been a pupil. On this day in 1942, the BBC began broadcasting in Morse code to the French resistant. And on this day in 1997, the comet Hale-Bopp made its closest approach to Earth in the skies over the northern hemisphere. The next pass is predicted for the year, wait for this, 4,397. I might be a bit old or possibly dead by then. And those were this hour's fascinating facts.
Weekend breakfast, feel alive and right. With David Bull, everything's just right.
Well, a very good morning to you. 5 minutes past 8, Saturday, March the 22nd. Weather terrible. Let's look at the front pages if you are just waking up. I mean, it is all about Heathrow and the chaos at Heathrow. 1,300 flights diverted yesterday. 300,000 people, 1/3 people. It's embarrassing at best. It also raises issues of national security, about resilience. How on earth did what happened, so a substation blowing up, cause so much chaos? So the front page of the Times, Heathrow chaos puts bosses in a firing line. Yeah, particularly the chief executive, who's paid about £630,000 every year. I'd like to know exactly what he is doing about that. Also, big questions for the National Grid as well. Daily Telegraph, colossal failure of Heathrow blackout. Airline chiefs have accused Heathrow of clear failure after Europe's busiest airport was shut down by a fire in the electricity substation. The Heathrow chaos could last for days, so flights have started taking off from Heathrow. There is some latest information about that. I'm going to be talking also to Lisa Minnow later on this morning at 9 o'clock about the latest data that we're getting in from Heathrow Airport. Also, if you are travelling, what you need to know. The Guardian this morning, chaos and anger as fire shuts Heathrow Airport. That's their headline. I mean, the whole thing is just terribly embarrassing. The Mirror, grounded. Lots of talk about whether this is down to terrorism or is it just incompetence on our behalf. Lots of issues here. Interestingly, that electricity substation was running at 106% of capacity, a very old substation, and of course, if you then put too much demand on a very old substation, it is likely to blow up. And this summarises it rather beautifully. Daily Mail, farcical. I would agree. Let's talk more about the fire at Heathrow Airport, what it means and what it should be telling political parties, independent operators, private operators about the security and resilience of this country. Joining me now is Professor Julian Richards, security and intelligence expert at the University of Buckingham. Good morning to you.
Good morning.
Now, am I right in thinking you were caught up in this?
I was indeed. I was flying back from Japan, hoping to land in Heathrow, and we were told just as we were approaching the UK that we were going to go to Newcastle instead. So,
right.
It was okay. I got off better than some people.
Well, at least you ended up in the right country.
Well, indeed, yes. So it was many hours later getting back than I was hoping, but it was all dealt with reasonably well in the circumstances.
What is your reading of this? Because there are lots of moving parts to this story, but essentially you have Europe's busiest airport. 1,300 flights were turned back, diverted or sent to different countries. Then you've got 300,000 people who are caught up in this abject chaos. There were lots of talk about when counter-terrorism police were involved. That seems to be sort of rather about methodology rather than causation. But essentially you have a substation running way over capacity, a very old substation, blows up and cripples the United Kingdom.
Yes, so we have to assume at the moment, as the police are saying, that there's no foul play here. This was just an accident. Of course, it's early days and we'll have to see what comes out. But what this shows is that Heathrow, which is clearly a very central part of our critical national infrastructure, can't be reliant on such a single point of failure. It's a wonder this hasn't happened before if, as you say, this substation is so old and running at such a capacity. And it really raises some questions about how we protect our national infrastructure of such importance.
It seems extraordinary to me that we have, apparently there are 6 substations that feed Heathrow Airport, but 2 of those substations located on the same site. So when that one blew up, it blew up the one that was meant to be there as a backup. I mean, it's just unacceptable.
It is unacceptable. I mean, 99.99% of the time, Heathrow runs perfectly well, and I suppose we have to remember that this amazingly important airport seems to get by okay most of the time. But this has really exposed what is clearly a very critical dependency.
Well, absolutely. And in July 2022, there was a report done by the Mayor of London, by Sadiq Khan, looking at major problems in the electricity supply in West London. Now, from my point of view, you cannot have this sort of plethora of data centres, critical infrastructure projects like Heathrow Airport, and have this quest for net zero by shoving a couple of windmills in the sea and crossing your fingers and hoping that's going to meet the demands of the United Kingdom.
Well, that's another issue, of course, is what our electricity strategy is going to be. But what this certainly shows is that here, like in so many parts of our national infrastructure, we've got some extremely old and creaky elements, which, you know, if it wasn't serving Heathrow Airport, perhaps it wouldn't matter so much, but it does. And this can't be allowed to happen, and we have to have a more resilient infrastructure.
I mean, it's difficult for you to comment. Heathrow Airport said all their backup systems worked perfectly. They have a biomass boiler that allowed the emergency lighting to go on. But clearly, if you have something like Heathrow, which is a hub airport, and that is part of the reason the government has given the go-ahead for the third runway, if you have a hub airport like that, surely there is an onus on the airport to have their own generators on site to be used as backup. You can't simply be reliant on very old technology that sits outside the perimeter of Heathrow, can you, from a security point of view?
No, I would agree. And of course, you know, there is a critical national infrastructure protection strategy that looks at these key sites and looks at where things might go wrong. You know, one would assume it didn't work very well on this particular occasion. So Heathrow Airport is a massive, busy airport. It makes a lot of money from people coming through. It's really got to, I mean, they had to make the decisions they made yesterday for safety reasons.
Yes.
We understand that. But they've got to be able to sort themselves out and have better backup systems. I would absolutely agree, because the cost of this, apart from anything else, is staggering.
And just in terms of our strategy here, the government has, and successive governments have prevaricated about whether we should have a third runway. Apparently we're now having one. Whether it ever gets built is another issue. But you've got these investment firms that own Heathrow Airport. They have decided not to build their own power station until they get the go-ahead for the third runway, and I can sort of understand the reasoning behind that. But clearly there has to be a conversation about the role of private companies running critical national infrastructure.
Yeah, I would absolutely agree. I would absolutely agree. There's all sorts of questions here about, you know, I was coming back from Japan yesterday. I had the pleasure of travelling on Japanese trains last week. They're light years ahead in the way that they deliver resilient and reliable and decent transport infrastructure. So we've all known for some years that the way we attempt to do these things is just not good enough. So, and this really raises those questions very starkly, I would say.
And just in terms of electricity generation, we spoke about this just a moment ago. Again, very few of our supplies, I'm thinking particularly of power stations, are owned by British companies. I again think that's an issue.
Well, it can be. I mean, we live in a complex, interconnected modern world where no particular business belongs to any particular country. So it's a reality of the situation to a large extent. However, there are resilience concerns, there are security concerns. It looks like in this case it wasn't necessarily a security issue, but it could have been, and it flags up the possibilities. If anyone with nefarious intent is watching this shows what sort of effect you could have if you hit the right thing. So that is a concern for sure. But
how much do you think the public is being told the truth here? Because counter-terrorism is involved. MI5 will be looking through every piece of evidence to ensure that they get the right answer. It does have the hallmarks of Russian state-sponsored terrorism on this. And of course, as we know, since the invasion of Ukraine, Russia is upping its game in terms of creating sabotage attacks on this country and other countries as well. Are there clues for you here that might point towards terrorism, or are you discounting it completely?
Well, no, I'm not discounting it completely. I mean, it called to mind, when I first heard what had happened, it called to mind an incident that happened in Berlin about 9 months ago, where an arms factory was hit by an arson attack, and that the German police are still saying that wasn't nefarious intent, but the German security services are saying they're pretty sure it was a Russian-sponsored sabotage attack. So, and there have been further incidents in Paris and elsewhere. So it did call to mind that this could be something of that nature. I don't know whether the police obviously will be playing their cards very close to their chest. They won't want to panic anyone before they've got pretty solid evidence of something like that. And the likelihood is that this was an accident, given the state of the substation that we've talked about. But we can't discount sabotage, Russian sabotage activities. We've seen it elsewhere in Europe. We know that this could slowly ramp up. This could even be a sort of test case where something was tried out to see what sort of effect it had. So can't rule it out. My money's not on that being the cause of this, but can't rule it out.
And of course, I'm aware of Litvinenko, the Skripals, also Jan Marsalek, the ring that was run out of Great Yarmouth. If you were advising the government in terms of ensuring that we have control over national infrastructure, what sort of advice would you be giving the government?
Well, certainly hostile state espionage activity, active activity, needs probably a lot more resource being thrown into it than has been the case hitherto, because the threat from these sorts of things is clearly going up. It's been at a sustained level for quite a long time, but I think we need to put a lot more effort into it. Of course, any extra resource that goes into it has to come out of other things, such as counter-terrorism and so on. So this is not an easy equation to deal with for the government. But I think we're living in dangerous and difficult times where such sabotage activities have to be considered and have to be looked at. And as we saw yesterday, something like this could have a very grave effect if it were to be undertaken repeatedly.
Do you think there is a case to bolster our security services?
Yes, I mean, I personally think we do have to spend more on defence and security at the moment. I know that's a very controversial issue, but I think we probably do. Whether that money needs to go to our own domestic security rather than military activities is a question that those at higher pay grades than me will be having to consider at the moment. And we shouldn't panic. I think we should say that this was probably an accident yesterday that caused horrendous amounts of disruption, but it hasn't brought the country to its knees particularly, and we shouldn't panic. This sort of thing happens from time to time. However, we are living clearly in a very dangerous and unpredictable world at the moment, and I'm afraid that means we have to have pretty strong and resilient security services.
Julian, thanks ever so much for your time. I'm glad you're home safely. That's Professor Julian Richards, security and intelligence expert at the University of Buckingham. Let's take a call now. Anne is on the line. Good morning, Anne.
Good morning to you, David. Thanks for taking my call.
Pleasure.
Before I go into the other reason I rang, and you said, who would I like to run the country?
Yes.
Well, I'd like the guy who said that, the government was selling off the family silver. Because actually Macmillan bought the most affordable and numerous council housing and affordable houses for people just above the limit to buy. And because he'd been in the war, I think he understood the ordinary working man and woman that we are. But the reason I was angry when I rang in is because Gatwick Airport used to have the long-haul flights. British Airways.
For British Airways, yeah.
Flew out of there.
Yeah.
And then they put everything into Heathrow. I have a son in Cornwall, people in Scotland. Many of them have to come to Heathrow to fly out on these flights. It's ludicrous. And
so
then,
my understanding, and I may be wrong, but my understanding is BA was hit badly, like all airlines, by COVID. They then rationalised their offering and then moved it back to Heathrow, which is the hub airport. That is, I think, what BA would say.
This was long before COVID.
Right.
Yes, this was when Gatwick was owned by us and hadn't been sold off, I think, to the Spanish or whatever. I mean, most of the people who sit around on governing bodies and boards, executives and non-executives, don't they actually say we have to look at the big risk factors? Don't they have to have people who rock the boat and ask awkward questions? Or do we have a country that has a lot of nodding donkeys?
I think the latter.
With whatever.
I think you're right about the nodding donkeys. Can I just ask you a question then? Given that, and you've brought up the idea of having this hub airport, Heathrow, for example, is there then an argument to say that we're putting all our eggs in one basket, and therefore, in some ways, Boris Johnson was right to say we need another airport, like the Thames Estuary, which could be used to increase capacity, but equally, in events like this one, could take away those flights if there is an issue in one of our airports that you actually have the capacity to deal with it?
I would agree, David. Nobody wants anything built anywhere near them. Goodness, I know that. But look at London. Look at how it's run. It's the largest city. It's overpopulated, and anything that goes wrong there affects thousands and thousands of people. So to have a new airport, or, yes, somewhere, that's accessible. And for goodness sake, open up Ashford again. Have other accesses to this country and other ways of getting out of this country, because they do it in other smaller countries.
Yes, I know. We just seem to be incapable to plan ahead. That was the point I was trying to make. You need a 20, 25-year infrastructure plan, which is cross-party, and you just get on with it.
I totally agree. What the hell is the matter with us? You know what it is, David? They've all been to universities in the past 50 years, and they don't seem to have been taught common sense.
Brilliant, Anne. Love that. I wish you a very good morning. Thank you ever so much for calling in. We'll take a break. Keep all of your messages coming in, please, though. I'm asking this morning, who would you pick to run the UK? Because someone clearly needs to be running the United Kingdom. Who would it be in your thoughts? Who would be the best person? 0344 499 1000. Just very quickly, a couple of messages. John in Market Drayton, good morning to you. Hi, David. I know what happened at Heathrow was embarrassing and it was chaotic, but at the same time, I think praise must be given to air traffic controllers. I agree. Throughout the air industry. To cancel flights was easy, but diverting flights at such short notice was a remarkable feat. Well made, that point. David, I'd gladly have the Italian Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni, this is Glenn Stewart Westerman, as our Prime Minister. She is tough on migration. She won't take rubbish from the EU, removing the woke agenda from Italian life. On the right of politics, she's not interested in making friends, but working for her country. This one says James Dyson should be running the United Kingdom. And also, earlier on, we were talking about adolescence and toxic masculinity, and this word I've learned, incel, and the emojis, which I knew nothing about as well. David, this is Graham in Sunderland. I think the lack of male teachers has made a huge impact on our young men's education from an early age. In the 60s and 70s, we feared our teachers. It worked for us as it teaches respect. Look how successful Gordon Ramsay is. And you can see the more robust approach, / bullying, not on everyone, but it still promotes respect. A thing which is sadly lacking in our society now. Great show as always. Thank you very much. That's food for thought. That really is. Keep all of those messages coming in. Who would you pick to run the United Kingdom? It's a tricky question indeed. We'll take a break. After the break, it's our head-to-head. Joining me this morning, Gawain Towler, Westminster Comms veteran, and Paul Richards, former Labour Special Advisor. Lots to talk about. This is Weekend Breakfast.
This is an organization that has one purpose, the Chinese government. It is to become the dominant power in the world to supplant the United States. And all I can say right now is if you don't think that is a threat to us, then you must be living in cloud cuckoo land.
Exactly.
I'm sanctioned by the Chinese government because I raised the issue of their genocide in Xinjiang. They are getting rid of an ethnic group in Xinjiang. The men are in slave labor. The children are in re-education camps. When did you last hear about that? Oh, that would be Nazi Germany, who were terrible, weren't they? Well, China is even worse.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello, welcome back. This is Talk 8:27 Weekend Breakfast, Saturday, March the 22nd. David, I'm asking this morning, who would you have running this country? Because someone needs to be running the country, and it clearly isn't Keir Starmer. Good morning, David. I would have Mr. Blobby running the country. At least he would talk more sense. That's Les in Cheshire. David, I would pick Greg Swenson. He was great on Question Time this week. Great show and debate. That's Bill. James Dyson, he's come up again. He should be running the country. Claire Muldoon, no, she's not allowed. And David, this is Matt in Hove. From the 5,000 migrants that have arrived this year, surely a few can drive a bin lorry and plenty can pick up the bin bags. That would clean up Birmingham's rubbish crisis in 24 hours. Get them to do something. Who would you have running this country and why? Let me know your thoughts on all of that, please. But now it's time for Head to Head.
Head to Head.
Well, joining me this morning, Gawain Towler, Westminster Comms veteran, which I like saying, and Paul Richards, former Labour Special Advisor. Good morning to the two of you.
Good morning.
Heathrow Airport. It's everywhere. It's embarrassing. Is it conspiracy? Is it cock up? It also points fingers at lack of protection of critical national infrastructure. I mean, it's a real concern. This.
I think heads are going to have to roll on this because certainly a national grid. It's just very worrying that you can do this much economic damage. Now, was it an accident? If you look at the footage, the fireball and the ferocity of that explosion makes me wonder. And I think the people that are saying, are fingers pointing towards Putin's saboteurs. It's not beyond the realms, is it? He's got form on this. We know he goes after a critical infrastructure. And look at the damage it's done. So I don't think this is a drop cigarette, do you?
Gawain, what do you think? I mean, this is a very old substation. It was running way over its capacity. They knew that they had problems with this. It was running at 106% of capacity. When you have a very old infrastructure like this one, and you overload it, it blows up.
Well, quite. And I'm very much of the cock-up rather than conspiracy side of things. I think there's absolutely no evidence. But what it does highlight is the dangers that the rest of our critical infrastructure are under in the light of having unhelpful actors. And so whilst this, I think, is just, it blew up of its own accord because of the reasons you give, the preparedness is diabolical.
And do you know what? If that's true, then, I mean, Putin's people will be saying, right, if it works there, let's do Gatwick next. The impact.
Absolutely, 100%.
Well, Russia has already said, wait for them to blame us. But I do believe that this, on this occasion, probably was the fact is that we haven't invested in the infrastructure. It does say something, though, doesn't it, about national critical infrastructure, and Heathrow is part of that. But it also then starts to beg questions about nuclear power stations, for example. How robust are they? Why have we got foreign commitment in those? Why are they being run by foreign entities?
But beyond that, the backup capacity, and the fact is that you almost, what feels like you've got 5 mice on a pedalator pedaling away to do the backup. And we've had, our backup capacity has been so overwhelmed by the desire for net zero that it doesn't have the sheer capacity to move fast. And if you look at that, OK, that's Heathrow, but what about a hospital? Because we've been closing down the diesel backup because it's
Which
bad.
is what we've always relied on.
What about hospitals? What about prisons? What about schools? What about not just critical transport infrastructure or security infrastructure or even just basic power infrastructure.
Let me ask
gamut.
Paul that, because Ed Miliband says this seems to expose some sort of vulnerability. No kidding. But of course, he is the one that is driving net zero. Gawaine's point is really valid, which is you need backup generators. They have to be run by diesel, don't they, rather than relying on windmills. Or you do what someone said and you have your own SMR attached to an airport.
Well, I don't know about... You can get the power from various sources. There's nothing wrong with trying to touch on net zero,
needs to move
but
like that.
There needs to be backup. It also needs to be protected. I mean, the nuclear power stations are protected by the nuclear authority, aren't they? And they're very well guarded for quite right reasons. Your point about ownership's interesting, though, because, you know, as we're moving towards a kind of, dare I say, war footing, and we're rearming and all the rest of it, do we want the Chinese running our small, medium reactors?
No, we don't.
And all the rest of it. So there is that now new question, I think, to be asked around who owns this stuff. And
do you think this changes thinking within government?
Yes, I think it does change thinking in government. Certainly,
hang on a minute.
Well, I mean, ministers yesterday, you know, were meeting and looking at the whole range of our critical infrastructure, railway stations, the airports, the motorways, hospitals, schools, you know, everything now. You know, if a small explosion, which was small, you know, relatively, like this, can just create £1 billion worth of damage, and all the knock-on effects of this are still going to be felt rippling out for decades, probably. People that didn't get to weddings and birthdays, businesses that didn't happen,
funerals,
and all the rest. Yeah, funerals. It's just terrible. And like I say, it emboldens our enemies, because they could look at this and say, right, you know, look how vulnerable they are.
Let me just ask you one question here, and it is quite interesting that we have prevaricated about a third runway at Heathrow for a very long time. The current government has now decided we're going to do it again because we weren't going to do it, now we are going to do it. Is there an argument to say that actually having this sort of third runway and having a hub airport like Heathrow is not the right answer? Perhaps Boris Johnson was right to have a new airport in the Thames Estuary to take away capacity. Then you've got actually the resources, if something does happen at Heathrow, to divert flights to another UK airport.
Disagree. I welcome the new runway at Heathrow. I think we need
Will it be built?
that build. Well, I think so. Now the government's behind it. I know it seems to take. Why does it take us 10 years to do something? The Chinese
40 years.
I mean, the Chinese
managed it in 6,
and the Chinese do it overnight, it would seem, and they've built.
So why does it take so long to build a runway?
Well, I think it's partly the planning, and this government is trying to get over that block of planners and NIMBYs stopping the building. But we need to get on with it. You know,
you talk about the Chinese being able to do it overnight. Well, yeah, they can, because they shoot their people.
Well, they can
frankly, it's not like with like. We are actually a democracy, but
it still takes a long time.
There has to be a point where, right, you have the plan, you have an appeal, it's decided, end. But not the 17th appeal, because they found a great residue route.
Yeah, I'm very minded of that house, the owner in China who refused to sell, and they just built the motorway round the house, and they decided that is what they were going to do. Just in terms of Heathrow, it is in the wrong place. That is the problem with Heathrow. There are far too many houses around Heathrow. They're talking about, for the third runway, they're going to have to bury the M25, as far as I understand.
So be it. I mean, London is London. And I don't think there's anybody alive who bought a house within 5 miles of Heathrow that did so before Heathrow existed.
Well, I would agree.
They knew.
It's been there a while.
Do you think
they can't then complain that there are planes
over
there?
Do you think a third runway is a third runway going to happen in my lifetime?
Yes, of course it will. Yes.
Do you think so?
And you've got a long life ahead of you.
20 years.
No, I think it will. It will happen. Yeah.
It will happen.
Let's talk about what's going on politically, if we can. Kemi Badenoch, whilst I was away in the rainy Spain, she says, I will not reunite the right with Farage. It's laughable. I actually spat out my coffee when I was reading this. She said that, you know, he's nothing more than a reality TV star. There was a riposte from him. When you look at the latest voting intention, this is Find Out Now. Reform still at 27%, Labour at 24%, Conservatives at 21%. Reformers' support has surged to its highest level yet in Scotland, and yet the fly in the ointment, Rupert Lowe, the latest in the tiff between Nigel Farage and Rupert Lowe, he says these messages unquestionably prove the Reform leadership has zero integrity. He went further to say Nigel Farage should never be Prime Minister. Is he right?
No.
Why?
Well, one, those messages were clearly a fishing expedition from somebody in his office. When he claims that they were there, they proved that it was all about his article and what he said in his article with the Mail. No, it's Farage being frustrated that the article was done at all at that time, rather than the content of it. It was, OK, you couldn't even wait until the nomination. You couldn't even wait until the May elections. Why are you such in a rush? It's 4.5 years before the next general election. And I think that Rupert has a teamwork problem. Always has had a teamwork problem, has since 2019. The fact is that Rupert has been forgiven on numerous occasions for his inability to act as a team player, and in the end, the patience broke. And whilst the content of that interview he did with the Mail was distinctly unhelpful, that wasn't the big issue. It was the fact he did it at all. Now, I know, with Farage, he's quite hard to get hold of. This is true, because he's busy, he's doing stuff. Kemi might learn that working hard means you wake up in the morning and things of this sort. But
does she not wake up in the morning?
Well, famously, during the election campaign, she was somebody tried to organise campaign stops for her, and they were told never before midday. Oh. She's not known as the hardest working person in the world. But that, by the by, the point is that Farage is a busy man, but.
Well, he's busy at US fundraisers, isn't he, at the moment?
Doing all sorts of stuff. But the point is that his door is open. If Rupert says, I've invited him by text to lots of meals, just walk into his office.
Who's the anonymous source who showed that, who gave that transcript?
I believe it's somebody, the content makes me think it's somebody in his office.
Someone in the office?
Yeah, someone in his office.
Oh, okay. He knows, doesn't he?
Well,
he's not going to tell us. Yeah.
Paul,
I think what's astonishing is, if I may say, we've got a by-election coming up, haven't we, in Runcorn? I think, is it on the 1st of May, quite possibly?
Probably. We don't know until Wednesday.
It's astonishing to me, as an observer of politics for 30, 40 years, that the Conservatives, the opposition, are likely to come third.
If that.
In that by-election. You know, normally, the run of play would be, they'd be, biting at the heels of the governing party, and they'd probably, pull off a coup. And yet, it's all about reform, and that's what's changed in the last 6 months, really, is that we are genuine, and I'm calling it for reform, but I think Reform are going to win this by-election. A disaster for Labour. I'm a Labour man, but I can see reform.
So let me just, before Gawain comes in, because I know he's obviously very close to it, as am I.
Yeah.
In terms of your view of reform, it has gone from a protest party, I would say, and it was a single-issue party under the Brexit Party, and obviously has then broadened its umbrella into multiple policy areas. Is there also, as part of that, the party has to learn and grow and mature? And that is, I mean, Kemi Badenoch made the point that 20% of its MPs have fallen out. Well, it's just 1 out of 5, so therefore it is 20%. But
I think there's two things. One is they have learned the art of populism, and across the world, this idea of populism, tapping into people's sense that nothing works and everything's going wrong, the discombobulation of technology, all these things, tapping very cleverly into that, so they're not a single issue party, but their weakness is Farage, because it's all built around his personality.
Isn't he their strength as well?
Well, it's all built around him, and if you build an edifice around an individual, and he has got form, let's face it, of falling out with people and having to create new parties and
yet so each time he comes back stronger.
So that's not a mass movement, is it? That is just a personality-led thing.
Gawain, isn't this part of a learning journey for Nigel Farage too?
Of course. I mean, and you've got to remember, this is somebody who less than a year ago, back in June, was looking at a successful career, having fun, travelling around the world, making money, didn't have journalists on his beck and call, chasing him down.
He's still doing that now, isn't he?
No, he's not. And he's now got to run a party, which is dashed hard work, and I know, I've seen it, faced it right up close. And it's really, really hard work. You've got to deal with little activists, egos, tiny egos, big egos. You've got to deal with a whole gamut, and they've created a thing out of nothing in the last 7 months. But you were talking about the Tories and their campaign in Runcorn. What campaign?
Just being irrelevant. It's incredible. They are irrelevant.
They launched their local election campaign on the slogan, what was it? Low taxes, better services. Well, has everybody forgotten? The highest taxes in peacetime and the worst services ever. It is the most astonishing gaslighting of the country.
Are you surprised, Paul, that despite the Rupert Lowe tiff between him and Nigel Farage, the reform hasn't just held its ground, it's increased its ground.
Well, I think the issue with Lowe is, we were talking about this just now, is that, of course, no one knows who he is. So it hasn't cut through because people didn't know who he was in the first place. And so a man they've never heard of has fallen out with Nigel Farage. They don't care.
Who they have heard of. Yeah.
They have, yeah. So I just think it is a classic bubble story.
Yes, if we took a photograph of you, me, you, David, I'm sorry, and Nigel, we went to a council estate in
Everyone
Preston.
would know me. What are you talking about?
In Preston. Who would they recognise? They wouldn't recognise.
Well, they certainly wouldn't recognise Lowe, would they? I mean, in fact, I saw him during the week, and somebody said, "There he is," and I didn't know who he was. So
didn't you?
You know, so he's not.
I mean, Rupert has many abilities, but being a team player isn't one of them.
We'll pause at that point. We'll take a break. Now, after the break, Labour is considering plans to deport failed asylum seekers, wait for this, to the Balkans, to lock them in detention centres. We'll talk about that. Also, I'll play you that video again of Starmer saying smash the gangs. It's a bit of a peach. This is Weekend Breakfast. Good morning.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back. Weekend Breakfast 8:43. I'm joined by Gawain Taylor and Paul Richards. We're in the middle of Head to Head. Let's talk about illegal migration, because the numbers are just absolutely appalling, Paul. 343 illegal migrants arrived yesterday. That's 636 hours. That's 3 full-to-capacity Premier Inn hotels. That's what someone tweeted yesterday.
Big ones.
Sorry?
Big hotels.
Big hotels, yeah. Well, obviously all of them are being bought by the Home Office anyway. That's why hotel prices have gone up. It's a disaster, this, for Keir Starmer, isn't it? Just in terms of the numbers. He kept saying, I'm going to smash the gangs, I'm going to smash the gangs. I've got repeatedly him talking about smashing the gangs. And in many senses, he makes sense. He says we're going to sort out the root cause of this. We're going to stop people coming over in small boats. They're not stopping.
I mean, it's a terribly broken system, and it is one that it was inherited, so it's not the Labour government's fault.
Hang on a minute, it's got worse. 5,000 so far this year. That's 24% higher than last year.
But the approach of trying to smash the gangs in a variety of different ways, so, you know, financially, taking their phones off them, stopping the boats arriving anywhere near the shore, you know, disrupting the supply lines, making arrests, closer collaboration with the French and the Belgians. These are all the things you have to do in concert, but it has to work across the piece. Because if there was one single simple thing that you could do, why didn't we all do it?
Why don't we turn the boats back?
Well, how do you do that?
Just turn them back.
People say, oh, put the Royal Navy into the channel.
Why don't we do that?
Because it wouldn't work, that's why, and the Navy would tell you that. If there was a single
Why didn't
club
Hitler use
approach,
small boats then? We can stop things coming across the channel if we have the will. But, I mean, the smash the gangs thing, have you noticed that we have no drug trade in this illegal drug trade in this country?
What?
None.
What are you talking about?
The point is that we've been trying to smash the drug. We've been trying to smash the drug gangs for 50, 60 years, and we have failed. And every time we smash one, another one pops up.
Okay.
It's a joke.
So let's see what the Labour government's policy is to stop illegal immigration.
You will have helped to smash the gangs, secure our borders, and save countless lives. Smash the criminal gangs, and they are criminal gangs, that are running this vile trade and putting people in the boats. Take those gangs down. I think smashing the gangs that are taking people's money is a deterrent. I think you have to smash those gangs. The only way to stop that is to smash the gangs that are running this vile trade. Smash the gangs.
Oh, 20 billion black hole.
More mash.
What do you think?
Smash.
It's just... It's no more sound bites, please.
But it's the right approach, isn't it? As a policy,
no,
surely.
it's not, because as I tried to point out, as I tried to point out with the drugs trade analogy, smashing the gangs won't work, because as soon as you smash one, you create another one.
So what is the answer?
Yeah, what would you do?
Well, you stop the boats and you make it very clear.
Well, stop the boats is another slogan.
What
does that mean?
It works.
It's another three-word slogan. Like Donald Trump.
I will tell you that what you do is state absolutely categorically that nobody who ever arrives illegally will ever receive rights to remain or nationality. Nobody.
And how do you enforce that? How do you make that happen?
Pick them up, put them in an asylum centre.
Who picks them up?
Border Force, the Royal Navy, the RNLI, whoever. They get landed, you pick them up, you put them in a detention centre, and you send them back.
Why are we not doing that? Is it a lack of political will?
It's a lack of political will.
OK, let me just tell you what Labour's plans are, by the way. This is the latest. This is in the Daily Mail. Labour is considering plans to deport failed, and this is the key word here. Failed
yes,
asylum seekers.
Wait.
Failed asylum seekers to the Balkans and lock them in detention centres because the number of migrants going up over 5,000. So they're going to send them to return hubs in the Western Balkans, like Albania, Serbia, Bosnia, and North Macedonia. There are... currently, Albania has 2 empty migrant detention centres. Isn't this rather like Rwanda? I know you're going to say these are failed asylum seekers, but we're offshoring the problem again, aren't we?
I mean, Rwanda was just a public policy disaster on a very, very grand scale. However, this is... No, it didn't work. And
well, it was never enacted.
Well, because it was never going to work. It was just an absolute waste of money. What a gimmick. But on the other hand, this is obviously within Europe.
Would you use Rwanda for failed asylum seekers? Because we've actually paid for all those hotels anyway. No. Why not?
Well, it's a failed policy. We have to cut our losses
What's
on
wrong
that.
with Rwanda?
What
have you got against Rwanda?
I love Rwanda. Nothing wrong with Rwanda at all.
Right.
Very nice place, I'm sure.
I'm sure.
Some of my best friends are Rwandan, you know. But the point being that the deal with Albania means that you can choke off the supply in the first place, which is a good thing to do. And it's within the scope. You know, I don't know what the status of this report in the Mail actually is. It's only a briefing. I don't think it's an actual announcement. But it's not a bad idea, because that might help. That'd be another way. But like I said, if there was a single way to do it, we'd do it. You have to do all these different things all at the same time.
There are 2 empty detention centres in Albania because the system that the Italians tried to set up with the Albanians failed. And if the Italians can't manage it just across the Adriatic, I find it ridiculous. There again, I think we've got upwards of 10,000 foreign national prisoners in our prisons.
We do, indeed.
Could we not start by sending them to those places?
You could do that, but then all those countries will send their British prisoners in, those ones back to us,
okay,
and then
so
you'd be in a much worse situation.
The thousands of Albanian prisoners in our prisons compared to how many British citizens in Albanian prisons? Maybe 3?
I think that's a can of worms you don't want to open.
No, I think
our prisons would overflow with repatriated Brits who are currently abroad.
I would love to see how many Brits are in foreign prisons compared to foreigners in British prisons.
That would break the system.
Do you think when Brits go abroad, they bust a bunch of criminals? Is that what you're saying?
I'm saying there are British people in foreign prisons.
Precious few,
and we
in
don't
comparison.
want them back here. Thank you very much.
No, actually, I think that would be a fair trade.
Well, we have to take responsibility.
I think we should take responsibility for our own criminals.
Let's just look at that. There are 42,000 outstanding immigration appeals, and many of them citing Article 8 of the ECHR. Reform's policy is to get out the ECHR. The Conservative Party seems to be changing on that. They want to redefine what parts of the ECHR we actually adhere to. Where does Labour stand on this, and what should they do, or should there be no change? change?
I don't think there should be a change, because I do support those international laws and, you know, common standards of decency.
Don't you think we need to rein in the
nations.
European judges? Aren't they over-interpreting? And that's what Kemi Badenoch is saying.
I think there is a legal blob, and I think, you know, politicians should have primacy in this country as well as internationally. But you still need international law, and that's, you know, it was set up after the war to stop nations from doing their own thing and doing terrible things to their own populations, and it's a decent thing to have.
Yes, but I'm sorry, not allowing a criminal to be sent back to Albania because his son doesn't like the sort of chicken McNuggets they have in Albania is hardly stopping countries from doing dreadful things to their people.
That's the stupidity of that is not a reason to have a much greater stupidity of removing all the laws completely.
Well, we're not going to remove. We do. You know, we had civil liberties in this country before we joined the European Union. We had rights in this country before the ECHR. The idea that suddenly this awful country that was the UK suddenly had freedoms when we got the ECHR is for the birds.
I have to go to a break. We'll continue. We'll continue after this break, because Ed Miliband, Mad Ed, has got a great idea. He's going to put solar panels on hospital roofs and on school roofs, and guess what? They're going to be made in China. That's right. You couldn't make it up. This is Weekend Breakfast.
Look, I mean, I've been a voice that's been pretty sceptic for a long time. I was a rebel on the zero emission vehicle mandate. I voted against that. I've been making the case for why my constituents shouldn't be forced to pay tens of thousands of pounds for heat pumps that will make them colder and poorer, rather than relying on better technologies that are out there, as well as calling for, you know, our great innovators to look at things like synthetic fuel. So I've been on this page for a long time, understanding that the cost of net zero is actually unbearable.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back. This is Talk 8:54. Paul Richards and Gawain Towler join me this morning. Now, solar panels bought for English schools and hospitals are going to come from China. according to Ed Miliband. That's mad, Ed. Over concerns, obviously, being levied over human rights impacts on the environment. This is GB Energy, which I still haven't quite got my head around. They are going to spend 180 million quid to stick rooftop panels on 200 school buildings and NHS sites as well. Now, obviously, the elephant in the room here, Gawain, is the solar panels are going to be made in China. They're going to be made using coal-fired power stations, shipped huge distances to this country, where we're going to stick it up under the umbrella of net zero.
Better than that.
Oh, yes.
Better than that, it also comes under the bracket of energy security. So
China,
having all of your kit from China, is that any better than having your kit from, as the Germans have from Russia, or as we have from Saudi or the Middle East? No, of course not. It's crackers, but it is all part of the same thing. So GB Energy gets funded by the British taxpayer.
Yes.
To send our money to China.
Yes,
that's a good thing.
Paul.
We buy lots of stuff from China, and I wish we didn't, because I don't like China as a state, and I completely accept on the Uyghur and all the other human rights issues. It's an issue. However, until we have skilled up the British economy to be able to build this stuff here, which we will and we must, and have a green revolution and all that stuff you're complaining about, but actually will lead to apprenticeships and jobs and businesses across the nation. If you do that, you don't need to rely on China. And in the meantime,
you can't have a green revolution unless you've got cheap, abundant power.
But in the meantime, it's good to put these panels on the schools and the hospitals, because it will make our infrastructure more resilient. We've just been talking about the blowing up of substations. You know, this means that they can generate their own power, and that's a good thing.
But just in terms of this, aren't we being sold a pup here? Because they're talking about investment from GB Energy. Gawain's point is valid, which is it's taxpayer money anyway, which we could actually spend anyway without having another body.
Well, it's a body that will help bring bills down and have a sort of bit of
How is it going to bring bills
for the reason you just described? They're sticking things on the roof that will create energy for schools and hospitals. It's a good scheme. But, you know, it's easy to dismiss.
If they were not paying the carbon levy in their energy bills, they'd have the money in the first place. The whole point is, in order to upskill, in order to create that industrial green revolution, you need cheap, abundant, reliable power. We've got that if we bother to drill and get the resources out of Lincolnshire, open, not fill the wells with concrete, sign up to further research projects and getting new stuff.
Paul, let me just ask you.
That's where it comes from.
You yourself has said that energy security relies on multiple sources.
Yes, including nuclear as well.
So nuclear, I think, is a very important part of that. Isn't also fracking, drilling, as Gawain says, part of that energy mix in the interim until we have the technology which you, by your own admission, say we do not have in this country?
I think there's too much of a question mark around fracking. I think the dangers
Well,
I think there's
seismic tremors.
Well, yes, I think there's a danger around it. We don't know enough about the technology.
Well, we do. It's been done for dozens of years.
Let him talk.
I don't think it's a good idea at all. However, we do know solar power works. We do know wind power works.
When it's sunny.
When it's subsidised.
I mean, well, we know there's no shortage of wind, is there?
There's a great shortage when it's cold.
And we have plenty of things like, you know, the barrages that we can build because we are surrounded by the sea. These are the things we can.
Any of that.
Well, exactly, and that's because we haven't had a government committed to doing it.
When it's too windy, you have to turn off the windmills.
But it's one of the ways.
And
the
Lib Dems blocked building a new nuclear power station when they had the opportunity.
Nuclear is definitely part of it.
And the arguments continue. I have to draw this to a halt, I'm afraid. Paul Richards and Gawain Taylor, thank you very much. That was today's Head to Head.
Head to Head.
Oh, there you go. They're still arguing. Deanne, good morning to you. The only way to smash the gangs is to turn the small boats back. Seriously. David, this is Ian Stevens, says, when Rwanda was first mooted, the migrants flooded into Ireland. Detention centres are the only way to deal with illegal migrants. Giving them money, phones, clothes, a hotel room, food, free medical care is hardly a deterrent. That's Bill in Fleet. If we can pick up migrants and bring them into this country, we can ping them up and send them back. That's Paul Richards. Two Paul Richards. That's Nick in Kent. So if we can pick up migrants and bring them into the country, we can pick them up and take them away. Also, ask Paul what he thinks Labour has done well. Why should people vote for Labour in Runcorn? You have 5 seconds for...
Well, investment in the National Health Service.
What's that?
Health Service. The National Health Service.
Oh, my goodness. This is Weekend Breakfast. Don't go anywhere.
I can announce this government will begin the biggest sustained increase in defence spending since the end of the Cold War. We will deliver our commitment to spend 2.5% of GDP on defence, but we will bring it forward so we reach that level in 2027.
The answer from European capitals has been as resounding as it is clear. We are in an era of rearmament. To respond to the short-term urgency to act and to support Ukraine, but also to address the long-term need to take on more responsibility for our own European security.
On Saturday, we also agreed a new £2.2 billion loan for Ukraine, backed not by the British taxpayer, but by the profits from frozen Russian assets. It is my pleasure to bring from His Majesty the King a letter. He sends his best wishes and his regards, of course, but he also asked me to bear this letter and bring it to you. So can I present the letter from the King to you?
Thank you very much. Am I supposed to read it right now?
Yeah, please do.
I will do.
I've got to tell him what your reaction is, so I need to know. I need to know.
He is a great gentleman. A great, great gentleman. He said he thinks the war's going to go on for a long time, and he better not be right. Well, I just think he should be more appreciative, because this country has stuck with them through thick and thin. We've given them much more than Europe, and Europe should have given more than us, because as you know, that's right there, that's the border.
What kind of diplomacy, JD, you are speaking about? What do you mean?
I'm talking about the kind of diplomacy that's going to end the destruction of your country.
Yes, but if you are not
Mr. President, with respect, I think it's disrespectful for you to come into the Oval Office and try to litigate this in front of the American media.
You're gambling with the lives of millions of people. You're gambling with World War III. You're gambling with World War III.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Very good morning to you, just after 9 o'clock already, Saturday, March the 22nd. If you're just joining us, a very good morning to you. Happy birthday, Georgie, as well, a very old friend of mine. Well, she's very old, actually, from med school. She was actually my first ever nurse. Happy birthday to you, Georgie. Great news if you are just waking up. It's International Day of the Seal. Yeah. It's a day that celebrates the marine mammal. Now, they vary in size from 40 kilos to more than 3,600 kilos, or in old money, that's 566 stone, 12 pounds and 10 ounces, which means you're quite a big boy. Now, in the wild, the grey seal can live up to 35 years and sleep underwater. Also, today, it's As Young As You Feel Day. So it's a day for those of you who use your age as an excuse. Oh, I'm too old, I can't do that. Now, today is a day where you can rebel and stop worrying about what other people think. You big baby. Also, happy birthday to a legend, an English composer, theatre producer. He's composed 21 musicals, 2 film scores. He is 77 today, and happy birthday to Andrew Lloyd Webber. It's a cat. Yeah, there are better musicals, I think. Better musicals. Let's move on to this hour's fascinating facts.
Today's fascinating facts.
So today's fascinating facts, I love this one. The first, 1926, the first directional road markings were introduced into British roads. Hyde Park Corner in London. They caused abject confusion, led to 7 accidents on the very first day. On this day in 1942, the BBC began broadcasting in Morse code to the French resistance. On this day in 2013, the death in Ripley in Derbyshire of New Zealand-born George Lowe Heathrow, aged 89. He was the last surviving member of the team which first conquered Everest in 1953. On this day in 2015, the coffin of Richard III, the last Plantagenet king, visited locations in Leicestershire associated with his final days ahead of the reinterment in Leicester Cathedral on the 26th of March. More than 5,000 white handmade roses were placed along the route of Richard III's cortege to raise awareness of missing people. And I can't quite believe this. And on this day in 2017, 4 members of the public were killed, 50 injured in Westminster in a terrorist incident on Westminster Bridge. The terrorist, who was attempting an assault on the Houses of Parliament, was shot and killed after he drove his car at pedestrians on the bridge and then knifed PC Keith Palmer to death. And that happened on this day in 2017. Those are this hour's fascinating facts.
Weekend mornings we're taking flight with David Bull, everything feels right. Weekend breakfast shining like the sun.
Very good morning to you, just after 9 o'clock. Good morning, Mum, who's just sent me a message. Good morning, Mum. Yes, you are right. Keir Starmer does speak like a robot. Anyway, if you are just joining us this morning, let's look at the front pages. It's all about Heathrow. Front page of the Times. Heathrow chaos puts bosses in the firing line. I mean, look, it's just terribly embarrassing at best. And at worst, it shows and highlights a lack of critical infrastructure in this country. I'm very mindful of our power sources, for example, nuclear power stations and so on. We need to protect our national infrastructure. The front page of the Daily Telegraph, colossal failure of Heathrow, blackout, 1,300 flights, 300,000 people, 1/3 people caught up in this utter mess. The Eye this morning, Heathrow chaos to last for days as fire exposes UK weaknesses. Don't forget, of course, you've got all these planes in the wrong places. You've also got crew who are out of hours, so therefore they can't crew those planes. So therefore it is a massive logistical exercise to try and get them back into the right places. Many people were diverted to Ireland, New York. They were diverted to anywhere on the east coast of the United States, and people missed many family engagements, including I saw an interview with someone who missed their father's funeral, which is just horrific. The Guardian, chaos and anger as fire shuts Heathrow Airport. The Mirror, grounded, one word. And my favourite headline this morning, the Daily Mail, farcical. Totally farcical. The question is this morning is, how is the airline industry recovering? Of course, we know the airlines are absolutely apoplectic about what went on, why there was no backup, no resilience, why a secondary substation was located at the site of the first one, so that also caught fire. There are meant to be 5 others. They also have a biomass generating system at Heathrow, but it doesn't actually do very much, and it only works when the power is on. Lisa Minnow, head of travel at The Sun, joins me now. Good morning, Lisa.
Good morning.
Right, where are we? Yesterday was absolute meltdown, as I said, 1/3 people caught in the mess that ensued. And of course, I saw these in fact, a friend of mine, Kay, who's just messaged me, she was caught up in it. She didn't actually fly. You had people who were diverted halfway through their flights. They turned back, landed at their originating airport. Where are we now?
Well, things are looking better today, definitely. The airport's open, that's the starter.
Yes.
But it's still going to mean, I think, we're going to have delays and cancellations going into the week. About 100 flights have already been cancelled across Heathrow and all airlines. BA, obviously the largest airline at Heathrow, they have 51% of all slots there. They're looking at cancelling at least 80 flights today, running about 85% of their actual probably schedule. But they're already saying that, you know, this is not going to be a just today only. This is going to keep going on for the next couple of days. We've got a fair number of flights delayed as well. So anyone flying today from Heathrow, check with your airline before you set off for the airport, because things aren't 100% back to normal.
Is there any sort of rhyme or reason to what they're doing? Does it affect short haul more in terms of cancellations, or long haul, or does it depend on the airline?
So what they basically go on is the flights with the most frequency. So you're going to basically try to get out of the schedule where you've got, say, 5 or 6 flights a day to a particular destination. You'll drop one of those 5 or 6. So there's at least an opportunity to sort of consolidate passengers onto the remaining flights that are going to that destination. And that's what you'll see happening. So it will be mainly popular short-haul routes, the likes of Munich, Milan, Frankfurt, Amsterdam, Dublin, places where we have multiple flights a day.
And I'm assuming New York as well, that's one of the busiest destinations, isn't it? I also read that some of the airlines are also using bigger planes for some of those routes, trying to squeeze more people onto the planes.
That's right. Where they have got the availability, that is an option. That was happening yesterday. Even EasyJet has basically, yesterday, they switched out planes so that they could take on more passengers, slightly bigger planes, so they could then have more of those passengers that were desperate to get to their destinations who'd originally booked with perhaps another airline. So, I mean, there are things that we can done. I mean, that's true in total, actually. You know, we've got more people flying than ever before, but actually the same number of routes, same number of actual flights taking off. It's the fact they're putting bigger planes onto these routes so that we can get more passengers there efficiently, basically.
I mean, it seems extraordinary. I was caught up in the drone strike in 2017. We lost our holiday completely. And I think what people struggle with the most, and people understand that things happen, it's the lack of communication that drives people absolutely nutty.
Yeah, and I think this is a real issue because, you know, it's your holiday. It's a really emotive issue, this, isn't it? It's your holiday. It's your longed-for trip to go and see friends and relatives. And all of a sudden, you just want someone to talk to you and tell you what you should be doing. The problem is that yesterday we had over 250,000 people all trying to contact their airlines at the same time. And if you look at the case of British Airways, over 107,000 passengers were impacted. Well, you physically don't have 107,000 people at British Airways who can help each individual person with their details. So there's always going to be this disconnect between the emotional issues with people who've gone, what am I going to do? What am I going to do? And an airline that can't have, you know, an infinite number of staff to deal with this. And then on top of that, you add in the complexity of the fact we had planes in the wrong places. We had planes that had returned to their originating airports. We had crew that had gone out of hours. That's a legal requirement. They cannot have crew running if they've gone out of their legal hours. So, I mean, you can understand for all of these airlines, there must be a huge amount of frustration. This is going to have cost them hundreds of millions of pounds, and it's nothing of their actual doing.
And that's right. And of course, they're saying to Heathrow, why have you allowed this to happen? In terms of compensation, just talk us through what people do. So you're there, your flight is cancelled. It's a bun fight to try and work out what to do. I heard stories of people booking flights. I think one couple spent £900 on an EasyJet ticket to get back to the UK. Do you go ahead and book your own flight? Do you wait and then get compensation, or do you go to the airline and say, I need to be rebooked? How does it work?
Well, there is no compensation because this was an incident that happened that was outside of the airline's control. There's no compensation due, sadly. But the airlines have a duty of care to you, and that includes food and drink when you're in the airport, overnight accommodation if you're having to be delayed overnight, and a way to contact your loved ones. Now, in reality, when you see something that, you know, took an entire airport down like happened yesterday, people can't get hold of their airlines. So best thing to do is, you know, the airline has a duty to get you to your destination as soon as possible after your original flight was meant to be taking off or landing. So if you do go ahead and book your own flights, you can, in theory, claim the money back from your originating airline. In practice, though, I think people find that very difficult. It is something that should be done. That is what the regulations say, but people find that very difficult. And you can understand why, because every airline is going, this is not our fault. There's nothing we could have done with this, and now we're having to pay Mr. and Mrs. Smith £900 for their flight when they only gave us £150 for the flight in the first place. So it is a real challenge, but it does mean that the consumer is protected. They might just have to really push a bit to get the money back. And as I keep saying to everybody, when you're in this kind of situation, if you are delayed, keep all receipts. So if they don't give you a food and drink voucher and you go and buy food yourself, keep your receipts and claim those expenses back from the airline, but make sure they're reasonable. You can't start ordering champagne or staying in 5-star hotels.
What?
They've got to be reasonable expenses.
Am I right in thinking that the coverage, and you say that you are covered, happens to be better if you're a UK national or a European Union national than,
Yes,
say, for example, if you're a US citizen?
I should have very much said that. It is actually exactly that. So if you fly out of the UK, the regulations apply to you. And if you're flying back into the UK on a UK or a European airline, the regulations apply to you. So say if you're flying in from Boston with United Airlines into Heathrow, there's lesser regulations there. There's lesser sort of duty of care. But the airline is still expected to get you to your destination. You probably just wouldn't be given a hotel and food and drink. They've still entered into contract with you to get you to your destination, so that would have to happen. But there is far more regulation and far more rights for the passenger if you're booking on a EU or a UK airline.
So finally, if I may, your advice to anyone watching this, if they're flying, say on, I don't know what day it is today, Saturday, say you're flying on Tuesday.
I think still to keep an eye on it. I hope that by then everything should be back to normal and we will be seeing a very normal flying day. But keep an eye on it. Make sure that your airline has all of your contact details. So check they've got an up-to-date email address for you, up-to-date phone numbers, so they can get in touch with you. And just keep an eye on the websites of all of the airlines and the airports to make sure that everything is going smoothly. Don't set off to the airport on the day until you checked your flight is actually up and running.
Lisa, brilliant advice as ever. Lisa Minnow there. Thanks ever so much, Head of Travel at The Sun. Let's take a call. Deborah is in sunny Oxfordshire. Good morning.
Good morning.
Now, I'm asking a question this morning because someone needs to take control of this country. Who would you choose from anyone in the world to run this country?
Well, I would choose you.
Hey!
Mr. Bates.
Oh, good.
From the post office
yes, good.
scandal, because he managed to sort that out and get it to our attention. Also, I would like to say thank you to Stephen Graham for raising the issue and waking up government and parents of adolescents. It's high time we protect our children, and it would be very useful to ban children from using technology, particularly wireless irradiating technology from a health point of view, but also it would cut down the amount of electricity we're all using.
Well, that's true. I mean, I think we need to steer clear of the possible health implications of those devices. But just in terms of the drama, I assume you saw the drama, did you?
Well, I haven't actually seen it yet.
You must watch it.
I hope to see it, but I don't currently have Netflix. But I think it's really important because he's raised some very big issues. Obviously, I personally feel that children need protection like we were protected with a watershed, and I don't think that children should be on an adult World Wide Web. And, you know, we should never have let them on in the first place.
Well, of course, there are parental controls, so it's up to the parents. They can actually stop them looking at it. Did you know what some of these terms mean, like incel?
I was aware of the word incel. I'm not fully aware of particularly what it means, but I am aware of the horrific influences like Andrew Tate and other people sextorting our young people. So it's very, very important that we get our young people protected because they're not being protected. And that starts with banning them from smartphones that connect to the internet.
What would you say to... School. I mean, I can just see the arguments you're going to have with your teenager who says, I need this phone, everyone's got one, I'm going to get bullied mercilessly if I don't have one.
Well, actually, my backstory is that I listened to Sir William Stewart when he recommended that children didn't have mobile phones until they were 16. Mm-hmm. So my daughter Jenny died in 2015, and she was trying to raise awareness of what was going on in school, and that was children, when they changed the uniform, they had pockets, and unfortunately that led to people watching pornography under the school desks. And she was absolutely horrified at the health effects to her, but to her generation, and in trying to make a stand and alert the world to what was happening, she unfortunately fell out of a tree, and I found her hung in that tree. So I have been trying very hard to raise awareness of all the health issues to our children, and we need to ban children from the internet, from the adult World Wide Web, as soon as possible, and to ban them from using smartphones. Now, I'm not against technology. It's absolutely amazing, and we just need to use it wisely. We're not using technology wisely around our children, which is why we've got the mental health crisis we have, because they are not designed to cope with being sextorted as a child in a primary school or in, the first couple of years of senior school. So we really need to get our children protected.
Very well said, Deborah. I'm so sorry about your news as well. Deborah, thank you so much for contacting the programme this morning. On that note, we will take a short break. After the break, though, I want to talk about the economy, because we have the spring budget coming up on Wednesday. The latest forecasts show that the Treasury is on track to overshoot their forecast by, wait for this, 63 billion quid. The growth forecast has been halved in a blow to Keir Starmer. I want to talk about all of that with Justin Urquhart Stewart, who one of you said should be running the country. I'd agree, actually. It would be a very sane country if he was in charge. I'll talk to Justin after the break. Also, if you could pick one person to run the United Kingdom, who would it be and why? 0344 499 1000. This is Weekend Breakfast.
If you look at what's happened since the general election, we have won 59 seats over the last 10 months since the general election, and that's 5 times as many as any other party. We're not afraid of local elections. We won last night in elections. We won the night before in Three Rivers and up in Harborough. Good successes against all comers, and we've had some magnificent results where we get good councillors who are out there working hard with good activists. We win those seats. We're not afraid of any other party. Bring it on.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back. This is Talk 9:24 already. Good morning to you in Bath. Good morning, David. My husband has just landed back in Heathrow after being diverted to Munich from Dubai. Well, I'm glad he's back. Steph, I'm asking this morning, who would you like to run the country? Because we need someone to run the country. 0344 499 1000. I'd like someone to lead my country that actually likes the country and wants to protect it and the British people, and they need to come first. Great show, Steph. Thanks very much for that. Who would I pick to run the country out of the cast of The Muppet Show? Nigel, thank you for that. David, excellent show as always. Thank you, Guy. We do need to smash the gangs. The only problem is the uni party and civil service are the gangs. David, with regards to the Heathrow chaos, shouldn't the next thing that is done is to check the next largest airport in the UK, namely Manchester, to see if their backups are fit for purpose? That's Maria in West Berkshire. They will have done that, actually, and that's why they then had to divert to all of the other regional airports, and then they had to divert to France. And, of course, there were issues over air traffic control as well, people going out of hours and so on. Stuart says, who would I want to run the country? Anyone except the current front bench. That would be a vast improvement. Keep all of those messages coming in. Good morning, David. Who would I like to have running our country? Trump, but I think he's got his hands full. Then Nigel, although he should deport illegals from our country, as Trump is now doing. Reform is cozying up to the Conservative Uni Party, I'm afraid. David, I would have Sooty and Sweet run the country with Sue as the Chancellor. That's good. My reason is, by the time Labour has finished running this country, we will need a magic wand to fix everything. Boom! Love that. Absolutely love that, Neil. Well done. Absolutely brilliant. Right, let's move on, shall we, and talk about the economy. The official economic growth forecast for 2025 is going to be halved next week in a blow to Keir Starmer. This is the OBR. Now, the OBR tends to be rather optimistic in its outlook. It's going to reduce our economic growth forecast from 2% to 1%. Then you've got Rachel Rachel Reeves is going to do the spring statement. Now, I am going to bet my bottom dollar she is going to blame Donald Trump and global economic uncertainty for the pickle that she is in. Well, someone who knows far more about this than me is Justin Urquhart Stewart, who is a fantastic economist who joins me now. Good morning, Justin.
Good morning, David.
How are we?
Very well indeed, thank you. But unfortunately, we need some good news for the economy, though. But we can talk our way around it.
Yes, so Betsy there, I think, your cat, it's a bit, no cat today.
No, well, they're just down here. They'll probably leap on me halfway through.
Oh, fine, fair enough. Now, look, Rachel Reeves, she keeps saying she's not going to break her own fiscal rules, her economic rules, but her headroom, I mean, she hasn't got any headroom, has she?
No, she hasn't at all. And the rules she's given herself has meant that actually she's completely boxed in. And what she's actually got to basically say is, right, OK, the world has changed. I'm sorry, the figures I had before have all gone horribly wrong. Well, this is what we've now got to do. And actually, if she's brave enough to do that, well, frankly, that's what we need to have happen. What we need to do is focus on the areas of growth in the economy, which are there, and we can see those in terms of some of the...
Where are they? Justin, where are these areas of growth?
Right, look at the tech companies around the country, and you can see the tech hubs that we've got. We're actually very good at setting up high-tech areas, high-tech businesses, and you'll find them, and all those sort of areas that tend to give themselves little nicknames like Silicon Roundabout and things like that. And you'll find those all over the country. You give those more access to more capital. They don't have access to a great deal of capital at the moment because actually our stock exchange isn't working very effectively at the moment. And it's not giving enough money through to those. The government could actually provide, it doesn't actually have to give them any money. All it has to do is give tax incentives, so things known as enterprise investment schemes, whereby the government will provide guarantees to around about half the capital. So actually what they can do is go and raise money, the government will guarantee some of it going in there, and then you'll actually find that more money will be coming in, more money will be spent, and you'll start seeing actually money being spent. That's what you need to be able to do. Get more money going through the economy. And what you're finding at the moment is the brakes are on, and so less money is being spent, the speed of the economy, oh God, You warned about the cat. She did
There we
leave me
are.
up. Oh, dear me. Climbing up my leg. And so the speed of the money going through the economy has slowed up dramatically.
Yes.
When you start doing that, actually, well, funny enough, the economy starts slowing. What you have to do, therefore, is actually change the attitude. One is people's confidence, and give people some confidence. Actually, we're not doomed. We're not. We're still the world's 6th largest economy.
Yeah, but hang on a minute. That's all very well, but the SMEs are really struggling. You've got the employer national insurance coming in April, April the 6th. I've heard of businesses who have no idea how they're going to survive. It's very difficult to be confident when your business is about to fall over.
Exactly. So you have to therefore also then change some of the rules that she had in the last budget. Cut that tax on jobs that she put in there and get rid of that.
Could she hang on a minute. So you're saying employer national insurance, she'd get rid of that? Could she?
Get rid of that.
Could she do that?
Oh, yes, she could. Look, she's got the OBR, will be giving her constrictions. She can actually turn around and say to the OBR, I'm sorry, I'm not accepting those. We're in a position now, we need to change more radically. And therefore, actually what I'm going to be doing, put ourselves in a position where in the short term we're going to be having more expenditure here, but at the same time also we're going to be carrying out some very severe government cuts as well. Now, you've got to balance this quite carefully, but what you can be doing is making sure there is more capital going into private enterprise and encourage that. There's no shortage of money in the country. What you haven't got is the plumbing to actually making sure it's going into those companies. If you can get more of that plumbing sorted out to actually make sure that private investment is going in, and then you'd actually find more money going in, more companies being set up, more money is willing to invest, and that's when you'll get more confidence coming through. That's the sort of element you actually want to have. That will give you a little bit more confidence. But if she stays with her current rules at the moment, she's going to find it actually very difficult. So if I were her, I would actually sort of bite this one and say, I'm sorry, I'm afraid life has got extremely tough. You can blame somebody else for it, but she can sit there and then sort of say, this is what we're going to do now, almost as an emergency budget, to actually take some really more dramatic action. And that's what it's going to need.
If she was to do that and to say, our economic forecasting has changed because of global instability or whatever, therefore I'm going to reverse some of those decisions I made, I think people would have new respect for her.
I think they would, because they'd actually sit there and realise and say that actually, well, politicians do realise that they're not actually genius of things, and actually sometimes things go horribly wrong, and they have to actually change direction from time to time. Well, to go back to the basics of economics, of how you get more money spent in an economy, and more money put into an economy, and it actually ends up being relatively straightforward as to what you have to try and do. So at the moment, she's got herself far too boxed in with far too many rules. The other thing she could do, as you were talking about earlier, is actually release some of the controls in terms of oil and gas production, and actually realise that actually Britain, in terms of overall participation in global warming, is absolutely tiny. That actually we should 1%. Be releasing those tiny amount. We should be releasing those, because they'll only be lasting a few years anyway. Get those out straight away and get those helping the economy, and then you can actually, when you're in a better position, actually take more direct action to actually start controlling your green gases and things such like.
So this is all great fantasy. What do you think the reality is of what she is going to do?
What she's going to do is come out with a story which is, we can blame all sorts of other different people. She's going to actually sit there and say it's going to be a very constraining period. She's going to come out with some cuts which I think are going to be, well, they're going to be unpopular. We know what they're going to be like. And of course, she hasn't got too much in terms of spending. Now, unless she's actually got a remarkable rabbit somewhere, a dodgy rabbit in a hat, she's going to find it really very difficult indeed. So if I were her, I would actually go back and just sort of say, it's time to rethink some of this, and rather than necessarily just keep playing with a rather difficult pack of cards, just say, quit with that one, let's start and actually rethink with some other ideas as to how best to get going, and focus on the areas where we know Britain can actually do things successfully.
I mean, I think the key is to incentivise people to do well. What they're going to do is freeze the tax bands, drag more people into the upper rate of tax. 7 million people are now at the 40% tax rate. When you compare that to 1990, only 1.7 million paid that. Now, clearly, surely you want people to keep more of their own money, so they go out and they earn more, rather than saying, well, I'm not going to earn more money because I want to stay under this tax threshold.
That's lovely. We used to call that the higher rate tax, wasn't it? The higher rate tax? That's the main rate tax.
I know.
But everybody has to pay. No, this is where it's the whole thing has actually got to really completely out of kilter. You need to actually look at the basics of running an economy. Running economy, primarily, look at this, it's a service economy run here. Manufacturing is a small part of our economy overall. Get services going. Services are going to be based on the fact that consumers need more confidence. How do you get confidence into that? Well, one of the key areas will be, for instance, adjusting issues with regard to stamp duty. Don't stop the stamp duty issue with the budget. Carry that on. In fact, I would actually lower it even more if possible. You want people to be moving house. If they move house, what happens? So if the kitchen goes, the bathroom goes, they spend more money and they employ more people. You get more money going through the economy. So that gives you a bit more confidence coming through the process. So, there are things you can do there in terms of corporate investment, actually with enterprise investment schemes, and in terms of individuals by actually making sure there's greater incentive for people to buy and sell houses and flats and do them up and get things going with that. If you can encourage that sort of process, it'll add to a bit more confidence and more money being spent. Those are issues she can do without necessarily having to adjust any of the other areas. But the other areas are going to box her in with a lot of difficulty indeed.
Justin, I've been asking this morning our viewers and listeners who should run this country, and you'll be delighted to know that you've been nominated.
I wouldn't trust myself doing that. Anyway, where am I going to put the wretched cats, for heaven's sake?
Well, you can have a cat in Downing Street.
There's already one there.
Exactly. Well, there you are. Justin, always good to talk to you. Thank you very much for your time this morning. Justin Urquhart-Stewart, economist there, talking about Rachel Reeves, the spring statement. Will she actually have the courage to do that? That would be extraordinary. I think it would be incredibly refreshing if she did that, to say, I've made a terrible mistake, or the economic situation has changed. We're going to get rid of this employer national insurance increment, and therefore I will save the pubs, the hospitality venues from collapse. That would be amazing if she actually had the courage to do that. The question is, does she have the courage? Also, Joe Clark says, and by the way, David, drop net zero. The whole thing is a farce, I would agree. Andy in Woolwich. Hi, David, great show as ever. Only one person to run the country if it was possible, Margaret Thatcher. Policies that lasted a lifetime, not a lunchtime. Keep all of those messages coming in. I'm asking this morning, apart from Justin, who should run this country? And apart from me, who should run this country? 0344 499 1000. We'll take a break. After the break, we're going to talk all things royal with Rupert Bell, Talk Radio's royal correspondent. Rupert is next.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is Talk 9:39. I was saying it was Andrew Lloyd Webber's birthday, 77, extraordinary. He studied at Magdalen College in Oxford and then at the Royal College of Music. He then started working with Tim Rice on Joseph, if you remember, Joseph and the Amazing Technicolor Dreamcoat. Can you believe that was first penned in 1968? Jesus Christ Superstar, which I still think is fantastic. 1971. And then Evita, 1978, all about Eva Peron. And, of course, Cats. That's my least favourite, I'm afraid, Eddie. It's my least favourite one. Starlight Express as well, written by him and Richard Stilgoe. And it's quite extraordinary. And Aspects of Love and Sunset Boulevard, which is an amazing musical as well. We talked about Andrew Lloyd Webber earlier. He was given a Grammy Legend Award in 1990. He was knighted 2 years later, created a life peer in 1997. And just an amazing talent. Lots of messages are coming in. Dave in South Gloucester, from what Justin is saying, Reeves is not focusing all of her own and her department's efforts totally on the economic recovery, but finding excuses why her disastrous policies are not working and who she can blame. I would agree. But wouldn't that be refreshing if she actually said, look, things have changed. I've changed my mind. I'm going to get rid of the employer's national insurance contribution uplift. Joan. Justin to run the country. Oh, yeah, I'm asking, who should run this country? Well, Justin should run the country. Real old days man, love his gear, and he's already got the cat. I agree, Joan. And as I said, he can take the cat to number 10. Lots of other messages coming in. Keep all of those coming in, please. 0344 499 1000. But first, it's time for Rupert's Royal Roundup.
Rupert's Royal Roundup.
Good morning, Rupert.
Good morning, David.
How was Cheltenham?
Frantic, but great fun. Always love it.
Well, yes. So I was going to say, I got invited to Cheltenham, but I couldn't go.
Well, it seemed like most of... there were quite a lot of politicians down there. They weren't in the same boxes, I don't think, particularly on the Friday. There were Nigel was there and Rupert was there, but for some reason they didn't seem to come together. I don't quite know what was going on, but that all passed me by. I was more worried about who was going to win the Cheltenham Gold Cup. And it was a great week, but life has moved on, and I've got to the Grand National to look forward to the week after next. So,
gosh, that's come round again.
Well, it's been coming around since 1849 when it was first won by a horse called Lottery. So you can't get away from the Grand National, David. So. And the good people of Merseyside will be ready to party like only they can.
Well, indeed. I look forward to the outfits, and that's just your one. Let's talk about, this is a great story that was, not yesterday, the day before, about, the secret offer to Donald Trump about the US becoming an associate member of the Commonwealth. I think this is rather peachy, and Trump seems to like the sound of it.
Well... It's quite interesting, and it actually reflects, in many ways, the sort of soft power of the monarchy, because we know Trump definitely has a soft spot for our royal family, as we've seen in the communications, and how almost King Charles has been used to broker sort of the relationship now between Keir Starmer and President Trump. And coming into the Commonwealth, which is an interesting thought, obviously the King is head of state of Canada. And of course, they are part of the Commonwealth, which has 56 nations as part of the Commonwealth. And maybe anyone can be invited in if they form to certain criteria. And maybe it will be a way of sort of calming the tensions that seem to have been developed between Canada and, of course, the United States, given what Trump has been saying. So quite interesting. Whether it comes off, I'm not sure, but it does show the significance of the way the Commonwealth has a part to play, and Britain have a part to play, and it's our way of still managing to engage on the international stage with a degree of credibility within the framework of those nations.
And of course, this is not a new idea, is it? It had the blessing of the late Queen. It was originally mooted when Trump was last in power. And according to the reports this morning or last night, Donald Trump suggested he will sign the United States up as an associate member. I mean, the Commonwealth, it's worth just remembering, it's a third of the world's population. It has 56 countries in it. Are there going to be tensions here, though? Because America has made it very clear they want Canada to be part of the United States. The King, as you say, is head of Canada. Is this not going to cause more problems?
On the face of it, it sounds like it is, but I think it's a way of also cementing the relationship between Britain and the United States, that the King is encouraging Donald Trump maybe to consider this as a strategic move, that he can exert his influence over those 56 nations, and it would maybe help. But obviously the Canadian thing is a separate issue. Obviously, lots of Canadians are up in arms about it. It's going to be a test for Mark Carney, the new Prime Minister, how he deals with it. Because obviously, I know one or two Canadians, but it seems like most of them are up at arms at the suggestion, and probably quite rightly so. But it's, Trump does like to throw the odd sort of curveball out there, and this is certainly one that wasn't on my sort of a hit list of ideas that Donald Trump might come up with, but he's also suggested Greenland as well, so I'm not sure how the Danes are taking to that as well.
Not well, apparently, Rupert.
So it is all part of, the sort of scattergun approach that Trump seems to be adopting at the moment, and he's hoping a few will land. But the Canadian one, I don't think will run. But the Commonwealth thing, I think if you look at it as a sort of an idea, it's not the stupidest idea to bring America within that framework, because, of course, the Commonwealth and Britain is designed to try and foster relations and create that soft power element. And it's a hugely significant part of the King's legacy, and he's very keen to make sure the Commonwealth is seen to be a viable group of nations that actually have a sense of purpose and can, to some extent, achieve things.
I mean, I did laugh when I thought about this. If the US joins the Commonwealth, then almost history repeating itself. Of course, they declared independence in 1776. Boston Tea Party and all that. We'll have America back, thanks.
Yeah, and they're planning lots of celebrations next year to celebrate 250 years of that famous Tea Party and the independence that developed as a result. So America will be celebrating. So it does seem an odd time, but there's no time like the present, because the world landscape is changing almost on a daily basis in what is going on. So it's an interesting development. Well, let's see what happens over the next few months. I do know the King values the Commonwealth hugely and sees it as part of his legacy is to make sure the Commonwealth is still a very tight organisation. He accepts there will be changes, and you don't even have to you can ask to join. You don't have to have been at one stage under British rule. There are 4 nations recently joined. I think one of those was Rwanda. So it is quite interesting. It has expanded. But obviously, if the United States joined, it would be a hugely significant moment for the Commonwealth.
It certainly would. You're right. Rwanda, Mozambique, Gabon and Togo were the last 4 to join. Rupert, I should be on a team of Trivial Pursuit with you. Let's talk about Prince William in combat fatigues.
Yes, he'd been off to Estonia. And obviously, again, this is all part of... he's an ex-serviceman. He wants to make a contribution. He was going to see the Welsh Fusiliers, I think, of which he's Colonel-in-Chief, who are stationed out there. There's been various NATO exercises. And again, it's a sort of little bit of saber rattling, obviously pointing towards, Putin saying, look, we're ready to defend Estonia should it be necessary. So, and he's out there on the in a way, I suppose, the front line, going to meet service people. He drove a tank yesterday. Look, we obviously know there's an air of symbolism about this, and obviously it would have been agreed by the government that yes, go on, off you go to Estonia. Look, we've got a pretty beleaguered defence force at the moment. I mean, I think our army is only 78,000 strong, and that, if you actually think what of that percentage are actually fighting force. We know our services are pretty stretched on all fronts. So it is something that will be exercising Keir Starmer's mind as to how they expand the, what do we do about the defence of this nation. But obviously William going out, and the King obviously is head of the armed services in a sort of a quasi role. Again, it is important that William is seen to be there and offering support, and his government support, and he's the easiest way to do it. And actually has a great empathy with servicemen and women anyway.
And of course, the political significance, he was wearing a NATO badge, wasn't he, on his uniform?
Well, and this is all part of, NATO is, obviously with back to Donald Trump, it's basically trying to encourage, and Donald Trump may have some people say he may have a point, getting nations to actually not be so dependent on American support. And there is some, that actually, look after yourself, get it right in your own. And yes, be there, but obviously don't just look towards America as we'll write a blank check and then we'll come over the horizons. Look, there's been some rather strange things said by press secretaries, sort of about the French. If it wasn't for us, well, I think we played a bit of a part in that as well. So I would take. But I get what's going on, and NATO is at the moment obviously having to deal with, feels at times a bit fractured. So for him to go there and it's a NATO exercise, let's not forget. So that's why another reason why he would have been wearing it, because the exercise in Estonia has been organised under a NATO umbrella.
Yeah. Rupert, fascinating stuff. Always good to talk to you. Rupert Bell there. And that was Rupert's Royal Roundup.
Rupert's Royal Roundup.
Rupert's Royal Roundup there. Keep all your messages coming in, please. I'm asking this morning, who would you pick to run the United Kingdom? Alex Phillips should run the country, says Laura. What? Alex Phillips? Yes, what a brilliant idea that is. David, Jim Ratcliffe should run the country, or any successful business leader. Great show as always. That's Craig in Kenilworth. Thank you very much, Craig, for that. David, this is Brad in Cambridge, one of our regulars. Good morning, Brad. I think Ricky Gervais should run the country. At least he'd be honest and give us a laugh whilst we drifted into destruction. Well, that's a cheery thought, isn't it? This one says, Vinny, Sir Alex Ferguson should run the country. Please, please. This is a good point. Barry. David, does Justin ever play a part in Bond films? Does he spray his cat white? Not that I'm aware of, but he would be a great Bond villain. I'd certainly have him as Chancellor of the Exchequer. He might actually understand what's going on. Mike says, I'm asking, so who would you pick to run the UK? Mike says, Kemi is the only one with common sense to run the country. Tories are always safe with the economy. I'm a bit worried if she doesn't get up till 12 in the afternoon. Don't you have to famously get up early? Margaret Thatcher, of course, survived on, 3-4 hours sleep a night, apparently. David, I would pick Ian Duncan Smith to run the country. He seems very knowing and talks common sense. That's Dee. Good morning to you. That's interesting, actually. I think he was before his time, because when he was in power, I just don't think he had the oomph. He certainly didn't have the public behind him. Another one, Pamela says, Ian Duncan Smith for Prime Minister now! Exclamation mark. There we go. Keep all of your messages coming in. Who would you pick to run the United Kingdom? The number 0344 499 1000. You can text the word talk in your message to 87222. You can message us on X as well, at talkTV. Don't go anywhere. Lots more still to come. Good morning.
If you look at what's happened since the general election, we have won 59 seats over the last 10 months since the general election, and that's 5 times as many as any other party. We're not afraid of local elections. We won last night in elections. We won the night before in Three Rivers and up in Harborough. Good successes against all comers, and we've had some magnificent results where we get good councillors who are out there working hard with good activists. We win those seats. We're not afraid of any other party. Bring it on.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back. 9:56 weekend breakfast now. David, if the USA joins the Commonwealth, that will be the end of the Commonwealth. The USA will want to rule it and other countries will leave. I still think there's a rather ironic this, as they celebrate 250 years of the Boston Tea Party, that we'll have it back. Thanks very much. I've always said that, actually, if Britain had rule over the United States, we get them out of a lot of trouble. Good morning, David. I would have Mr. Blobby running the country. At least he'd talk more sense. That's Les in Cheshire. Thank you. Martin Lewis is the perfect person to run this country. There's 2 of you that said that. 3 of you that said that. Jacob Rees-Mogg should run the country, says Dan in Kent. Also Vincent, Winston Churchill. Oh, I like this one. Neil, Stoke-on-Trent. No nonsense, this one. Good morning, Dr. David. I'd like to see Anne Widdecombe running the country with you and Claire Muldoon, who was here earlier with me as deputies. Oh, no one messes with Widdecombe, let me tell you. I'm seeing her, actually, at the weekend. Anyway. Also, I would have Ian Duncan Smith in charge. He has the experience, ideas and talent we need. Best PM, we never had that. Sue in Cambridge. This is a bit of a shot in the dark. Graham in Bushy says, the person I nominate to be a Prime Minister is Peter Cardwell. He should run the country because there will be free Pizza Express pizzas and Diet Cokes for everyone. Talking of which, he's here. Good morning.
Cheers. Very good morning to you.
Good morning. It's Prime Minister material.
No, I'm afraid I will have to pass on that opinion. Well, I just
get
think
a nice house.
Free Pizza Express for all. Yes. Everyone should have a cat by law and look after it well.
Right.
What else? Oh yes, instant death penalty for people who don't put earphones in on their phone and play their phone music on the train or any public transport. Instant death penalty. Yeah, those would be the general rules.
I think also banning those stupid sachets of tomato sauce which have no tomato sauce in them. You know, whether you open... It's just one of those things. I was thinking things that drive you insane. That drives me insane.
Why does that...
I don't know. I'm a grumpy old man.
Clearly.
Yes. Anyway, how are you?
I'm very well. I'm very well.
You look tanned. Have you been somewhere?
Tanned? No,
yes.
maybe I've just been to makeup.
Oh, yeah. Oh, well, there is that. How long did you spend in makeup?
Well, a nice period of time with the lovely Claire, who did a great job.
Oh, she's very... The music sounds like we haven't got much time. So, lots coming up?
Yes, indeed. We're talking about the colossal failure over Heathrow. £650 a night for hotels around Heathrow.
900, I saw